I got your mic hooked up.
I was getting ready to be like, do you need a second mic?
Oh no, I'm ready, man. I'm using SM58s.
Yeah.
These are SM58s. I just watched a video on YouTube, and apparently I didn't know this, but now it's locked in that the 58 and the 57, same exact guts.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Like it was like sort of familiar, but like now that's locked in my brain where I'm going. It's the exact same mic, it's just a difference in the head shell.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong, but I think something about the head shell accentuates certain frequencies.
It was that the SM57, there's a little bit of like high end rolled off because of the shape of that head shell or something, which, you know, you almost would think because it seems like less there that it would be like, I don't know, like more flat, and then at the 58 with the filtered kind of pop shield would roll off highs. But, yes, variations so subtle. It seems like you really probably wouldn't even be able to pick up on it.
Yeah, I have no understanding how microphones work. Like I went to a website one time when I was starting to buy some microphones, and there was a website that sold like upgrade kits for like work. Like you could take like
Fuck with the transformers in there and stuff.
all kinds of shit for like. I have like the Audio Technica AT2020s. I have two of them. Because it was like, oh, this is a pretty cheap like large diaphragm condenser. I'll get that. Probably good for drums and shit. And it is. But they would sell like these upgrade kits for it, and I was like, I don't understand like what I'm like what the fuck.
Yeah.
Like, what am I like? Why is it? I don't know why it works. Like I understand how a guitar works. I understand that it's like that string has metal on it. It vibrates over that magnet, and that sends a field like through like sends signal through a cable out of that into like the pedals and the amps. Like I get that. Like I do not get this at all.
I mean, the way I think of them, it's almost like they're just little speakers that are just like so. It's like the coil is just so, like just like tense that like the movement of like thousandths of an inch is like all it takes to like change the voltage of the coil like electromagnet, and then it
You
just
can
amplifies
make a
it.
normal speaker work like a microphone, can't you?
Yeah, I've used them. Do they using like a regular house speaker? Like it seems like there's so much room for error. If you just take those two wires and hook them up to like something that's going to amplify, you know, like a signal, you'll get like this tremendous amount of low end. Yeah, but the speaker thing works, and it's a nice little experiment with like recording drums. So like you put that if you put it in the front of the kick speaker or the kick drum, you know, like the speaker, the amount of movement that it makes is like such a strong signal that it'll like peak the mixer. So it's like kind of requires, I think, a lot, or at least in my experience, it required a lot of like finagling to get it right.
Do you have to like when you do that? Do you have to like face the speaker toward the drum?
Honestly, like
how does that? I don't know. I don't understand.
It's like just like if it's like facing the drum, it's almost going to be too intense of like too much action is going to happen in that speaker, and it's almost just sitting it near it will just pick up enough resonance where like you can get like frequencies. It honestly, I mean, it's like it's fun, but it also can be like, do you really want like a shitload of low end coming from your kick drum that may not be tuned and that might conflict with like bass and stuff, you know? And then it becomes like maybe that wasn't that, but it's a lot of fun if you're just recording drums, and that's all it really is just like a little speaker, and it's just like basically like, you know, that a wire going around a circle that's like in between a magnet, and then when that thing moves, it just like your pickups are making a little bit of voltage off of that. So like you moving that face of that speaker cone there is just like making a low voltage, and I think these are like low impedance, so they're just like sensitive enough. And then like condenser mics are like they're like they need a lot more amplification, like they're even more like just sensitive or something. Like these things are just, I don't know, like from what I've gained over like recent, like just watching shit, it just makes me be like, I just want a fleet of SM58s. Like I just feel like I just use them for everything.
You can't have too many of them. Like that's why when I bought that drum mic kit, the reason I picked that one is because it's 3 57s and one Beta 52A, the kick drum mic. And I was like, well, there's never going to be a situation where I don't need an SM57. Like there's all these like other drum mic kits that come with like drum specific microphones, like the little ones. And first off, I was just like, I never see people actually use these, like in real studios. So I was like, I don't really. I mean, maybe they do, but I just like I've never like any video I watch or any like recording I've ever done. Like we don't use those microphones, so like it's like I don't really want to buy that kit. And then I was like, well, I definitely know also that I will absolutely use like an SM57.
Yeah.
So that seemed like and it was like $400 for that for like 3 of those. Maybe it was less. I don't know. I bought it a couple years ago.
They're like all day long going for like $100 for like 57, 58s. I feel like the kick drum mic, I don't know the price off the top of my head, but it's probably going to be around. Yeah. And like you might find a sale like where you can get them for like 80 or 90.
It's not like the world's best kick drum mic, but it's like kind of like it's not like bottom level. But it also like I was like, well, if I get into it and I buy a better one, I can still use this one like a bass cab.
Did you have you ever I want to turn you up a little bit.
Yeah.
You ever watch any of those reverb videos where they show you how to there's this one they have like it seems like they have different ones I've noticed, but one series they do is like drums.
Yeah,
the drums of this.
All of them whenever I see them.
Yeah, me too. And one thing it's like I feel like I've maybe commented on YouTube videos like twice in my entire life. Like I'm not that kind of user, but like part of me has like this like I don't want to say saltiness, but when I watch those I'm just like I appreciate this content, but I also feel like this inspires me to want to make what I think is more like interesting, which is like they're showing me how to recreate this drum sound, and that's cool, it's interesting, but they're like as they're going through and showing how they're doing it, they're like it's like, oh, we're using this microphone which is like, oh, that's only like a $3,000 microphone. Oh, and this $5,000, oh, we're going to put this one in as a room mic. Oh, we're going to use a $7,000 microphone as a room mic, and you're just going like this is, and then like this huge desk. And it's like, it just, all these things where it's like, man, like this is actually, I feel like is only really applicable to a very niche, demographic, because it's like, is a bedroom producing kind of person, you're like, I don't have the space or the money for all that gear. It would be really interesting to see like that kind of concept, but applied to like, lowest common denominator, Yeah,
like what's a consumer level thing you can use? Which I guess like on one hand with a lot of those, at least they tell you what kind of microphone the really expensive ones are. So it's like you could probably like Google that model and find like something that'll get you in the ballpark where it's like, if it's a large diaphragm condenser, then it's like, okay, or a ribbon mic or whatever else, it's like, okay, I can probably figure out like something to get me like in the ballpark of what I'm looking for. I appreciate it a lot of times for just like some of the techniques they're doing that I wouldn't have thought of. Like there was one, I can't remember. There was like one, I think it was like a Queens of the Stone Age thing or something where it was like, we're going to record the drums and the cymbals separate from each other.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I didn't think people actually did that.
Yeah, I know. You almost feel like you'd be cheating or something. You're doing it wrong by like breaking it apart.
I remember people telling me that's what they did or like whoever did. And I was just like, nah, they didn't fucking do that. Like that doesn't make sense. And then you see it and you're like, oh, that's exactly what they fucking did. Like that's definitely it.
Based off of that, I tried doing that, and it was like on a like not too long after seeing that, and it was just sort of like, wow, like a lot more fun to be able to do something with like your hi-hat that wasn't locked into your ability to juggle all the different meters with like hitting the snare and the kick and all that, and then also being able to do that shit on the hi-hat. But then also just recording was so much like cleaner to not have the bleed through.
And the tricky part of it too, though, is that like you got to play it pretty much the same way both times, because like the first time they're doing it, they're playing like dummy cymbals. And the second time they're doing it, they're playing like dummy drums. So it's like you gotta kind of be pretty close.
Yeah, I think the way I remember a recording I actually did that on and kept it. It was like I think I was like, using my leg. It's like I was like beating my leg as the filler for like whatever I wasn't trying to do for whatever take it was, and it was like could almost like half hear that. Like knowing that I did that, when I listen to it, I can hear like this extra, it's not a percussive sound, but you're like this like padding that's like just like a really muddied like clap or something in the background. Like, no, that's me hitting my leg instead of a drum. So I could isolate just that one piece of the kit.
weird.
Yeah, it's almost like I say it like I want to like I don't want to be like a salty mofo, but sometimes I'm watching I'm just going like, oh yeah, like anyone can really pull this off. It's like you're like you guys are using like the cost of like a brand new truck or something in terms of equipment. I'm like I'd like to see someone doing it with like the most like common accessible like it's like what can we do with SM58s? It's like let's record everything with SM58s like for half a joke, but also just for the fact of just like pushing the limit. Like I've heard shit talk on 57s and that they are always used but they're not that great or something, and you're just like I don't know, like until I'm proven otherwise. I feel like I feel like I just want to champion that microphone or the 50 just these guys because they're just like just so like I don't know, like rugged and like like as it, like almost like utilitarian, where it's almost like until I feel like it isn't getting the job done, I almost just want to use these exclusively. I have a couple other nice old dynamic microphones. I really only one. I have a Sennheiser M 251, I think it is, or 421 or something. But like, yeah, it's great and all, but like fuck, if I dropped that, I'd feel awful. Like it's like they can break, and it's like this thing's vintage. You drop this thing, and it's just like a new shell for the top of it you can get for like $8 online.
Yeah, not a big deal.
And it's like wow, like I just like something that gives you a confidence, where you like aren't afraid to use it.
I've seen people break them. Like I've seen
the guts pull out.
The guts pull out of it, but it's rare. I mean, it's usually like it was old.
Yeah.
At that point, and I stopped when I was doing stuff at the Circle. At first, they had a couple 58s there, and they walk. So I started just buying the $20 PV microphones that they had at Lynx, because I was like, it's eventually gonna like I don't know how many times people intentionally stole them, or if it's just they just wind up in somebody's bag, but like they, that's just what happens in a place like that. So it was just like, why am I going to spend? I wasn't spending my money on it, but it was like, I'm not dropping $100 on a fucking 58 for also like a dive bar where like it's only going to sound so good in here. Yeah. Like, it's like that doesn't.
Sound reinforcement's tough, It's like it's almost like you got certain things that you got to work with, and it's almost like the quality of the microphone. It only goes to a certain point where it's like more expensive isn't going to solve the problems of like reflections and things like that.
I'm the one operating it. Like I don't know what I'm doing, so it's just kind of like there's no reason for this to do. Like there's no reason to spend that kind of money on this. And I've seen, to what you're talking about, I've seen other people on YouTube and on videos or whatever that are teaching like how to get started recording stuff. Say that of like just trying to get like as good as you can with like these couple things first, and then move on, because like so many people probably get caught up in like acquiring the equipment.
Gear acquisition syndrome, and you're just like, well, shit, man, my favorite band on that favorite album of mine, they use this thing, and it's like I'm going to go with that because I know I'm likely to then swing and get something like they got, but really it's like
nope.
Yeah, it's like
not how it works.
A $20 PV mic is gonna be probably way more useful to you than like a $3,000 ribbon mic, because you'll be able to use it and not be afraid of like fucking up that much of investment,
Yeah.
Did you notice any with using those mics, like any distinctive difference between?
No, way louder. Like they were like way louder. And like, other than that, I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure that I know that for a fact, like the 58 sounded better, like objectively better. But like, it was. But once again, it was a case of like, well, I didn't have enough know-how to like really capitalize on that and like make that work better for the situation, and neither did like the bands playing. Or sometimes it was like, this might sound better per se, but like this band doesn't sound good. So like it doesn't make a difference. Or vice versa, if the band sounded really good, it didn't matter that it was a $20 microphone.
Yeah.
Because it was like so much of it in that place specifically, because it was like just a room and like the instruments usually weren't mic'd and it was just those guys playing live. It really had so much to do with like how well can the band like EQ and level their own stuff and use their own dynamics to sound good. And so like if a band could, it was fine if it was a $20 microphone with an extent. Like I mean, like sometimes I can't think of any time I had one that was like that was like really bad, but like the $20 PVs were like way better than they should have been for that price. But like they were super hot, so like it was really easy to make them feedback, but like, you just didn't have to put a whole lot of signal on them and not a whole lot of gain, and it would also like that would get also like the vocals over the instruments, which was always a challenge when like people always want to play too loud. So I don't know, little differences like that, but like I'm sure to the seasoned professional that like really knows what they're doing, they'd be like, "Fuck, I can't do anything with this mic." But like for me, it was like, well, makes a noise.
It was like a couple days ago. I was watching a video on YouTube. It was like Shure, like was like the channel or something. It was like there, like it was like this almost like it wasn't a podcast, but it was just like half like a presentation where it was just audio, and there was like just certain things I pulled out of that one, like a story about like a guy taking like Sinatra. Like they tried giving him like a 59 or something. Like, hey, we got this other mic. We're gonna switch out. We're gonna think about doing it for all these for the thing. And he did it. And he didn't like it. He's like, give me my 58. And like he's just like that. Like the story where it was like Sinatra like had a preference and knew the model and was just like using the 58. And this was like perhaps maybe like residency in Las Vegas era. Like later in his career. And then another example was like that I got out of it of like learning was like people. Like frequently asked questions about like, concern about like blowing a mic up, like breaking it by like yelling into it too loud. And the guy was saying like, I'm sure there are exceptions, but for the most part, all it's going to happen is like that diaphragm is just going to bottom out and it won't go any further. You might get the distortion from that bottoming out, but you're not going to blow it up yelling into it. And an example of like Henry Rollins in use, like never like ruin one other than from like sweating will affect it and potentially damage it. But like, as aggressive as his use of them would be, like never breaking them just from like, the sound you're putting into it.
You can do that with a ribbon mic. You can
just go too hard and
blow them. I think it's like fairly easy to do. Because I've read people be like, be really careful if you buy like an expensive ribbon mic, like on a guitar amp and things like that. Like you don't want to, like you can blow those up. I think fairly easily. But other than that, I think it's a lot trickier than most people would think. But then, like you said, you have to think about like, well, let's think about the realistic scenarios where I've seen these used. Like if there's one up against like Slayer's 412 guitar cab, like that's getting a lot of volume. it's fine.
Yeah, I like I'm really like excited about doing more recording here, and when I was packing things up at the last house, I just started doing these recordings, and it was like, man, like I really got into like outboard gear and like synths, and then started like MIDI and like all this stuff that was kind of like of a direction I never really thought of myself going into. But once you start playing with like a drum machine and a synth and a sequence, all of a sudden you're like making like instrument techno music, and you're just going like, this is a lot of fun. And it's like you really get into it. Then I pull out for a while because I move, everything's all packed up. Now I'm trying to think about, I can't just have everything out hooked up ready to go, because it's almost like what happens is 95% of it goes dusty, and then you feel like an asshole because you're not using it, and you have this cool fucking fill in the blank, but you're not using it. So then it's like, okay, maybe I should just approach this where I only put out the things I'm going to use. And it was like, I'm like, I see a couple like, from previous waves of interest on, YouTube. I'm getting suggested certain videos and I'm watching them, and I'm just going like, wow, like I'm not as receptive to this style of music like right now, where it's almost like I'm not wanting to go all in on just like twiddling with little knobs and making like weird crazy electronic noises. And it's like, and then it starts making me think of like, well, I do like that stuff, but I almost just feel like I wouldn't want to sit and listen to a whole album of that. I wouldn't want to like do it live and subject an audience to that for like a long duration. But I think this stuff's really interesting, and I feel like in a collage kind of approach would be pretty rad to have it be like, like a segue. But then like I just feel like with this new setup, I'm like, I do have some of this electronic gear I want to incorporate and have ready to go. But I'm putting a lot more focus on this new setup with like recording like I want more live drum recordings than I want drum machines. And it's like I want more like guitars than I do like sequence synthesizer parts.
Yeah.
And it would be nice for them to kind of be all synced up and tied together, MIDI, etc., etc. But like I think I'd rather be able I'd have a lot more fun, you know, keeping it like natural meter where like even if things aren't synced up, if they go off, that might be cool, you know, like happy accidents and stuff.
That's how people play music.
So like I'm like kind of like wanting to do a little bit more, use more microphones in this new wave of recording. And like so like where I was at in the beginning of 2022, did the Widow's Peak, you know, a microphone preamp. I have like half a dozen like microphone related ideas, like like preamps and things like that. Like I really just like have a bunch of ideas I want to get out of my mind and make some concepts that might be really conducive in the studio for myself and others that want to use microphones more. And but like in the pursuit of that, that's where like so this mixer down here came about, and this is a Shure mixer. So it's like, you know, we all in the family here. We got Shure mics, Shure mixer. It just like the feeling of bringing these things together, like, oh, these just have to be a perfect pair. But like these are can run off of 9-volt batteries, and these are like field mixers, and this would be the kind of stuff you'd see someone like with like in a bag on their side. Yeah, and they got like they're holding the boom mic. What's cool about this guy is that it's got a limiter on it, so it's a compressor, like a brick wall kind of compressor. Yeah. So like if you got your plosives or whatever, instead of it, you can turn it off, and if you turn it off, then you just overdrive the signal and get like distortion, and you know, a microphone that can be not always very pleasing. Yeah. But when you engage the limiter, it basically uses the compressor, and it just like it just stops at a certain point. So what you can do is you can drive the gain on that mic, and so it mostly is just staying squished. Yeah. And that's there's a bunch of these different lines that Shure made of these mixers with this limiter feature in them, and I bought a bunch of different eras and stuff. Like some of them have VU meters on them, but this one I like. Because it's the most modern, but still has transformers on the inputs and the outputs. So these particular mixers, this is the Shure FP410, 410. Shit, man, living in Maryland, you know. I mean, I was like, this is destiny here. Yeah. But like, what's for me, like, I kind of always just like was avoiding stuff with transformers. I didn't really understand transformers, but once I started getting into these, I opened my brain up to the transformer. You know, I was reading about them, watching videos on YouTube, and I was like, wow, transformers are fucking cool. Like, I was like, they're a good mojo part, you know? And like, so like with a transformer on your input for your microphone. So basically it's just like taking your balanced signal and then like converting it to like a single line instead of your inverted and non-inverted signal. And, it helps with, you know, all kinds of remedies for like, you know, noise and this and that, but it just feels like a mojo part. And there's other ones that came after this that are just all like solid state. And so with those, you're like, oh, well, at least I know that these newer ones, man, these shits are probably gonna last a long time. Where you start getting these older ones are the ones that have VU meters on them. You're like, oh man, these are probably gonna need to be recapped, or you know, I could be using this, it could just blow up in the middle of a situation. But this is like the 90s, so it's like got enough newness to it where like I feel like I can actually work it. Yeah. But it's got some mojo going in there at those.
What's it recording into?
So it's got it's all like XLR interfacing, but it's got an 3.5 millimeter jack on the back, which is mono, and it says tape out. So I have that going into a 3.5 millimeter mono plug, and the other end of it was mono, but I put on a stereo plug and just split the signal to the left and right, the tip and the ring on the plug, and that goes into this camera. The camera's got an audio input on it. Oh, okay, cool. And so you can just like get the levels right, and because it's like the tape out, it's already like line level and not too hot. But if you come out of the XLR ports on the back of this thing, and you go If you go line level, it bumps it down so much that you almost have to use some gain on whatever you're feeding it to. And if you put it into microphone output level, it's so hot it like peaks on the mixer, and like and it's like it doesn't sound good. And I was like, oh, this is like, oh man. So my solution is, because I don't really want to add gain on another mixer, because then that's kind of like putting the character of this secondary mixer into the signal path, and I really want to be like focusing on the magic of these particular mixers themselves. So what I'm doing is I'm using a inline pad on the cable. So coming out of that one mic, I put a negative 15 dB pad, and then going in to the mixer, and I don't have to worry about the levels peaking or anything. And I get a good strong signal, so I don't have to add any gain to it. So it's just like strong enough where I don't have to add anything, and just trying to get the truest sound out of that. And like right now, like this is like the Swiss Army knife in the studio for me, like for vocals and then for drums. And like with recording drums, man, like I was with these mixers, you know, they've got multiple inputs. So like the first sort of like approach I was using these mixers for is I was using like, oh, I'm going to put a mic on the head of the snare, a mic on the bottom of the snare. I'm going to have a mic by the kick, maybe one inside the kick. I'm going to have my overhead. And like I was like doing all these things and just going to town with trying to get a good mix on a mixer that had a mono output. And that way I'd be ready to record drums at any time. The shit would sound good. Well, every time I would do that, by the time I'd come back to wherever I left off, I was like, it just doesn't sound right. And then like when it was happening, I was like, oh, well, maybe I should just cut that one out. I'm just going to cut this one out. All of a sudden, I'm down to one microphone. I'm like, it sounds awesome. And I'm like, I'm really going to like go all in on this one mic approach. Like I feel like when it comes to recording the drum kit, it's so easy to get a satisfactory sound if you got a good, some good sort of gain staging on your microphone, and you got a good spot you've picked at it, but there's a lot of room for experimenting, but like it almost just doesn't even feel like you have to try that hard. Just like kind of like point a vocal mic, like a dynamic at the drum kit, anywhere that's convenient for you, and then you fucking put a compressor on it like this thing has, drive it up, and you get all this like room sound, and you get like the full sound, but there's also no like distortion or overdriving that's subjectively can be nice, but a lot of times it can be problematic, I feel like. But anyway, like I'm just like, I just want to do drums with one mic. And
makes sense. I watched, like, when I wanted to try and start doing it, I watched some videos, and like there was one video I saw that walked you through like one microphone, two microphones, three microphones, four, like where to put them and like how to do it. And that really gave me a lot of perspective on it, because it's like I was always used to two different approaches, which was one was like whatever you got to do to get it recorded. So like, bands were recording practice demo. It's like put a shirt around the tape recorder and hit go. Or like in a studio where it's like we're gonna mic every single drum and overheads and everything else, and it's like so many situations where it's like it sounds okay, it doesn't quite sound like what I had in mind of like what I thought, and then sometimes it would be really good, but it's like there was so many like variables in between, but I never had the opportunity to like play with it myself and figure stuff out. And then like when I was doing it with Derek after I got this stuff in his basement, we're like, I just put the kick drum mic on, a 57 on the snare drum, and like took the two AT2020s, like one directly above the snare drum and then one over by the floor tom, like I read like in the Glyn Johns setup to do, like facing, like set up by the floor tom, like facing the snare, and then one's like above the snare, like facing down. And then I think we just put like a 58 in the room, like over by the staircase, and went with that. And I was like, this sounds great. Like this sounds like this gets me like all the control I really need. It's like you're picking up the toms with the two overheads and all the cymbals, and then I've got like, if I want to emphasize the transients on the snare and the kick drum, I have those two microphones to use, and then I've also got the room for the ambience. I really would like to have another room, I think, or maybe it would be nice to have maybe a condenser to do that with. And it's been a couple years now since I've done this at all. So like and we only did it the one time, so it's not like I have a lot of experience. But like spent a lot of time at least after that, like playing with that in the DAW or DAW or however the fuck you say it, like playing around with the mix of it and compressors on it, different stuff to just enough to be like, probably shouldn't expand past this until I like really have this down. But like it seemed like it's pretty easy, as long as the room sounds good.
Yeah.
To like get pretty good results out of just this stuff. Like I feel like if I were to like try and like put an individual microphone on every single drum and like 2 mics on the snare and all that stuff, it's like it's just going to be too many variables for me to play with, and I'm not going to understand what I'm doing, and it's just going to get bad.
Yeah,
it's
man.
kind of like during the pandemic when we were home alone, I bought that guy Kurt Ballou, who plays guitar in Converge and does like God City Studios. Like I always loved his recordings. So like he did like a class online that I bought where he goes all into like all this shit about sound and like pretty scientific at certain points of like how waves work and all this stuff. Like, but then he's getting into miking stuff, and it might have been that video or maybe another one where he was talking about miking guitar cabs, and like somebody asked about 2 mics, or maybe he was just talking about using 2 mics. But at one point he was even like, I wouldn't try to use a second microphone until you like really have like using 1 microphone down, like get that good and then bring in the second microphone, because like it's gonna add up just too many variables you have to play with before you can get started.
Makes absolute sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because then like when I set up here, I had that amp, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try recording at home, just for like my little Instagram video, and I'd put the 2020 on it and the 57, and I was just like, this sounds like dog shit. And then I took the one out of the equation, and then it was fine.
Yeah, it's like phase cancellation issues is like a real, like it's one of those things where like in like earlier days of my experience with that idea, it was like it just seemed confusing, like what's going on. Like I don't understand. Like it's like if you had like a phase button on a device and you hit it, you're like, it doesn't sound any different. And it's like like I'm like or like if it did sound different, you're going like, I don't know which one of these is the bad one now though. It's like it did change it, but I don't know which one's the right one. And then it's like now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, you know, that's the risks of running into like elaborate miking scenarios, is like when you start putting multiple microphones into like close proximity of one another, they can be picking up on similar phases, but similar like frequencies, but like at the different spot in that frequency sort of you know, happening, and then all of a sudden it'll overlap and cancel itself out. And I feel like for me, what really helped me understand it was messing around with like synthesizers and stuff, and that like when you really can play with like taking 2 oscillators and overlapping them and then kind of like moving that, and you start to hear like oh, that's like what like chorus or flan, you start to feel like understand like by taking the same signal and overlapping it with itself, but like pushing it around, how it changes the sound. You're going like, oh, that's why like, dude, like you could be losing out like on, you think you got everything looks cool, like it's going to sound amazing, and then you're just like the snare sounds like butt, and you're just like, that's because like these different harmonic part, you know, all these different specific notches in your frequency response have been canceled out by like the other microphone being like 10 inches away, aimed at the same way or something. And then so yeah, it's like for me it's almost like I want to, like, even with a guitar cabinet, like I've seen some pretty fancy approaches towards miking a cabinet, but it's like it seems like there's just so much room to find satisfaction with just one microphone. Just like if you put a pair of headphones on and you got like a guitar looper playing through your amp, so you can like sit there with the headphones and move the mic around. It's crazy just how much sound you get from where you're pointing at in the same distance at the speaker, you know? And like freaking Evil Audio, Big Black, Steve
Albini.
Yeah, like he's got a lot of cool videos that are just lots of information to be gathered from like a lot of the videos I've seen of his, and with like miking techniques, and he talks, I feel like one of the videos he had like an oscilloscope and was like talking about that, like the phase and stuff like that, and that was like a nice like supplement to like what I had already gathered from like the way synthesizers help me understand those phase issues. But yeah, I fucking just wanna. I just can't get enough of like experience with this stuff. Like I feel like I'm not good at it. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm great at it. I love learning, and I feel like it's like a lot of fun with it. But like I just can't seem to satisfy the itch.
That's how you get good at it. And the other thing too is like, I've noticed sometimes when I talk to people, I don't even want to say younger people because it's not even necessarily always younger, but it's just like there's an attachment to, because like what I liked about that video and the electrical audio stuff and all that stuff is like they get a lot into, like you said, like the science of the way sound works and acoustics and phase. And like I've talked to other people before where it's like they just want to learn how to like fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
And it's, or like just want to learn how to use the software and stuff like that. And it's like that stuff, that's fine, but like you can't, like you need good ingredients before you can do that. Like, because the first time I tried to record stuff, I recorded like the one band I played with, Prison Liquor, in like our drummer Zach's parents' basement, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. And it's like it didn't come out terrible, but like it was like, first off, a pretty small room, like bigger than this room, but like pretty small room to have 4 guys with like instruments playing. And so we faced the guitar amps against the wall and mic'd them. And then the bass went direct. I think I mic'd his bass cab too. I mic'd his bass cab and I ran him direct at the same time. I used one of my stereo pedals to like split his signal. And then I can't remember how many mics I put on the drum. It wasn't many because I didn't have many left. And like you can't really fix that in the mix. Like by the time I got it home, I was like, I could make it like sound fine. And I added a guitar track. And at the time, the idea was that we were going to add like 2 more, like each, me and Dick, the other guitar player, were going to add another guitar track each and then do vocals. And it just never happened. Pandemic and whatever, yada yada. But I still played around with those recordings a lot. And like, could not fix that in the mix the same way that I could just get a good sound really quickly with the one that Derek and I did together, where like I spent a little more, I had that knowledge from that first time to apply the second time to be like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try this. And it made all the difference. And like that guy does have a course that he sells called Fix It in the Mix, about like what happens if like somebody just supplies you with bad audio and like you've got to do the best you can with it. And he runs through all these things you can do, and it's interesting. But it was also just like, I remember talking to somebody after that, and it was like, I was like, I'll share my login, you can watch those videos. And they're like, oh, I just want to watch that one then. And I was just like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to like learn. But there's a weird thing where I find with a lot of people that are like fundamentally not curious. And that's like, I feel like you're only going to get so far if you're not a curious person.
Yeah. And you know, with like recording, you know, I think like, you know, the curiosity can be almost like you know, I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are like you know, like it's almost like that's like they're into cars, but they don't actually care about like the mechanics or so much, you know, where it's almost like with like music, I realize I'm like, I would just think like the way I feel about it, I'm like, well, anyone that just loves music is just going to be just as loving it to knowing like, oh, what kind of mixer were they using? You know, and then you realize you're just going like, I guess it's like sort of niche to be that down into the science of like, you know, the engineering of audio, where like, it's like understanding that like just because you're talking to someone else that like is in a band or something, they may not give 2 shits about microphones, and then you're just like, oh, like, well, I'm just like, from where I'm coming from, like my passion for music like bloomed this like connection to recording, and that like this like technical thing became like a creative artistic thing. And then it's like for me, like that's like part of the reason I feel like most of the reason I've even been taught myself to play any instruments to the degree that I can is so that I could record those sounds, you know, and like, you know, like, oh, like get a drum kit. So instead of sampling drum machines, I could sample like a real drum kit. And then I wanted to worry about copyright clearances. And it's like a guitar, it's like, even by like mid-teens, I had heard enough examples where I was like, you don't even have to know how to play this thing. You could get all kinds of crazy sounds out of it. You know, just like effects pedals.
It's got dots on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and then bass guitar, you're just going like, okay, another one where it's like, you know, you're playing root notes most of the time. It's totally acceptable. And it's like, there's a whole, I'm listening to like the Brothers Johnson and just being like, this shit's awesome. But like, I also have come up on music where you're like, oh, they're just playing the root notes of the power chords that the guitar player is playing. And you're like, okay. And it's like, I can figure this out. And it was just enough to have something to work with in recording. Yeah. And I was just like, for me, I'm like, I have a lot of fun at just the potential of like capturing something that even if the performance wasn't that great, like you're like, man, this sounds like cool. This sounds like something that evokes something out of me, that whether it's reminiscent of something I've already heard, or it just like, I don't know, like, oh, if I did this once, I could probably do it again, but be doing it with something like recording my friend's band or something, and get something cool out of it and make something that everyone feels something good about, you know?
Yeah. I see that go two ways sometimes, where it's like, you guys have people who are like, get too hung up on like, it's not going to be good. So they like never try it, which is like, no, it's definitely not going to be good. Like you have to get that out of the way first though.
Yeah. You gotta fail a lot. You gotta
do the bad stuff first before you get to the good stuff. But I'm guilty of it sometimes too, and like I've seen it with a lot of people. It's like, that's gonna suck. It's like, yeah, it's gonna. You gotta get the reps in.
Yeah.
But then I'll see people too where it's like, all right, I did one of these. Like, all right, let's get somebody to pay me to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, nope. You gotta like, once again, let's get the reps in. Let's figure it out a little bit more.
It's tough because of like how subjective the subject material is, where like, I don't know if there's words work together, but like the fact that like what is like, this sounds good to me, to someone else is like, sounds like kind of like shit, or something, where like, like loving lo-fi music, where it's like, well, I don't think all music is going to sound great like that, but it's like a very special experience to discover a demo version of a song you've heard a bunch of times. You really, really like this song, but the demo version goes to the next level for you. Yeah. Where like someone else are going like, this sounds like garbage. It sounds like someone recorded on a tape player with a shirt thrown over top of it. You're going like, yeah, I know, it's awesome. It's so authentic, where like, then you have like, people trying to make that sound, and it just, like, it's like so much harder than it seems to like make trash sounds. And then like, but then like super produced stuff, it's like sometimes that can really be satisfying to hear, and other times it's just like super boring because it's just so traditional sounding. It's like your taste and your flavor, and like being into recording, it's almost like to have the opportunity to record somebody else. It's like you kind of have to like be really open-minded, because like, the people want you to give them something that they can do something with, and that may not necessarily be like the same vision that you might hear or think would be cool. And but it's also like an exercise for you to like, maybe it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, but like it takes you outside your own box and gives you more practice. And it just like feels like I have not been able to record enough in my life. I'm so grateful for the amount that I have had action to. Yeah. Like living at Wallride, friends being in bands, the opportunities I've gotten, and just sort of like, it was nice to be able to record other people than, just your own self. But then, doing it on your own too, it's like a whole nother little special, realm, because like now you're doing something that's like nobody's expecting anything out of it. Nobody even has to know about it. And it's like at the end of it, you might have something that is evoking for you, where you're like, man, like I like this to some degree, and nobody else in the entire world has this, and it's like this special little thing. It's like I don't even have to put it on the internet. I don't even have to tell anyone about it, but I want to listen to the shit out of this and live in this realm of fantasy that this has potential, but then like burn out on it and then just goes away, and just like move forward, and it's like that's kind of the cycle I've been in for the past couple years, where I've recorded a lot of material, but have kind of fallen short on where I used to be at, where I always felt like I gotta like put it together for a presentation, whether
Yeah.
it's just putting it on Bandcamp. And that's it, you know, like I'm not trying to play live, but I just like wanted to have like a final product to it. And in the last couple of years, it's been difficult to achieve that because it almost seems like there's just so much variety in the things I've created where it's like, I don't want to just slap together a bunch of shit that doesn't make sense. I want it to be like cohesive.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but I don't have enough stuff here to put together to make it even like a cohesive EP. Or these examples are like, well, I'd like to re-record those and make them better and put lyrics to them or something. And then it doesn't go that far. But, man, the shit that I put my voice to ends up, I feel like, rising to the top. And I'm like, again, going back to like wanting to record more and use more microphones, it also feels like using my voice and putting my voice into stuff is going to, like, I don't know, like I'm aiming to do that more because instrumentals just seem to get lost.
Yeah, and people don't. I mean, like most people want to listen to music that has vocals on it. It's just like that's the most important thing to most people.
Yeah,
that was like a big like in younger years playing in bands, like always kind of thinking of the vocals as like secondary, and then getting older and being like, well, A, maybe that's why nobody liked it, but B, like, maybe that's not the smartest way to think about it, and like maybe you should spend some time like working on that aspect of things, especially when it's like getting into other forms of music where like the singers are really fucking good, and then or like seeing really good singers live and just being like, whoa, like I'm never gonna be able to do that, but I would like to like maybe not think of this as like a secondary thing that's like not that important. I don't know where I'm at with that yet though, because I haven't like worked on it. It's like I'm already taking guitar lessons, so it's like I can't really like take on vocal lessons too at the same time. So it's a weird thing I've thought about a lot, where it's like either maybe I gotta find somebody that can sing real good, or I'm gonna have to like pay somebody to like teach me how to sing. Or like, because I could always like kind of stay in key enough. I didn't know enough about keys then to understand the idea of like writing for your range.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand that at all until like fairly recently. I think I sort of understood it, but I didn't understand how it worked. That like, oh, it's more than just like some bands tune down a half a step. Like some writers favor writing in certain keys because that's where their voice works best and they don't have to strain as hard. And then I think I noticed that more getting into like country music and like folky music, like not folky but like singer-songwriters kind of stuff a little bit more, where it's like I would notice how many people use capos.
That's just what I'm thinking, like capos, man, like the like capo on the guitar, and all of a sudden you're like, now it's in your range, and like I'm hearing that, and I'm just going like, for so long just that eluded what that means. I'm like, I don't get it, like what are you changing there? And it's like now I have a better understanding of it, but I still I feel like I'm light years away of even really being able to apply that, because of like, well, my guitar playing skill is not to the degree where it's almost like in my mind I'm like, I can't wrap my head around even just like, oh, I'll just put a capo on and I'll change it. But it's like I'm playing like power chords, so it's like it almost feels like that's like obsolete as an option there. So I'm always just trying to force it with what I can do, and it's like so many times I've just given up because I'm like, no, I can't sing this. So that kind of just, that project's over with.
It's like you wouldn't be using a capo, you would just be moving your power chords, like your whole pattern.
It just goes up just
to a different
or spot. Down or
like, which should be the same. Because like I would get into a guy, like I remember like I got into like a Guy Clark this year and was like, all right, I'm gonna like try and learn how to play a couple of these songs, and then like, all right, like these both have like capo and second fret. That's kind of cool. And then like I go watch like a live video and it's like, man, he's done like 5-6 songs so like fucking capo at the second fret. And I was like, oh, that's because he sings better in A. That's what it is. And it's like, and then I was like, oh, okay. Well, all that means is that like you're playing what would normally be like a G chord, so you can use those patterns around that, like G, C, D, E, whatever else. But like by putting that capo there and moving it up, like now suddenly that's an A. And it's like he doesn't have to play though like an A bar chord or the open A. He can play a G.
Yeah.
But it's because it's moved up, now it's this. Where I get tripped up with that is like I'll go out to like the jam night at the Circle, which has been like it's a lot of fun, but it's definitely like a challenge because it's a totally different realm than what I've spent most of my life playing. And like I'd have a couple times like, oh, I'll throw a capo on for this song, and then it's like I quickly will lose track sometimes of like where I'm actually at, especially when it's time to play like a lead part.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, now like I don't quite know how, I'm getting it a little bit better now with like time, but like or like I set up like this one guy brings like song charts a lot of times for like his songs, and he'll give them to us. I'm like, all right, cool. I was like, all right, I see this is in like B flat or something, so it's like, all right, I'm gonna put a capo on and play it here, and then like halfway through it, I'm like, I don't actually like your brain has to do like some gymnastics of like, this says this, but I'm gonna play it. This says this chord, but I'm gonna play it like this chord, but it's actually gonna be that chord. And like for a lot of it, I could like do it kind of on the fly, but then I would hit a part where I'm just like, ugh. It's like, but we're playing in front of people, so shit. Like I better fucking get it. And like it's low stakes, but it's still like higher stakes than if you were just like sitting in your room by yourself. So it is kind of like a trial by fire.
Man, that's like quite an amazing feat for the human brain to be like making these connections to like understand, you know, like it's like that's one of the things I just think is so like exciting about like music and playing instruments is like sort of like this like almost like juggling, but so much more complicated and internal, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like where you're like using like your vision, you're using your ears, you're using like the muscles in your upper lower body. I mean, you're just using all this like juggling so many things to pull off these things that just like, you know, like I understand what you're saying, but to me it just almost just sounds like I just can't even like imagine like how many hours I would have to put in before I could even like think I could even maybe do something like that.
It's not as many as you would think, but at the same time, the whole thing itself is like unmasterable. Like it is like the unattainable. Like you are never going to, like you're never going to master it.
Yeah.
Because like no one does. That's just the way it works. Like there's no like, it's not like a video game. Like you don't beat the fucking final boss.
And then it's like
I beat guitar.
There, I'm done.
Like,
it's over with.
It doesn't work that way. Like you just keep doing it. Like and that's I think what makes it exciting for me is like there's always going to be like another thing or like another level to it in like every direction of it, where it's like it doesn't even have to do with like being better or worse or like it's just that there's always gonna be another thing you could learn to do with it or to like use it for, and that's what keeps it like fascinating. So it's like, but that's like getting back to the other thing is like that's because I'm always gonna be curious about it, where like I've met people too where it's like they're just not like it's just like, and that's fine. Like you don't have to be like, I've known plenty of people where like playing guitar or playing whatever instrument is just a vehicle for them to be in a band, and that's cool. Like that's awesome. Like I'm not like trying to shit on it, but it's just one of those things where it's just like I can't do that. Like I gotta keep like trying to do something new with it, and I love the fact that it's like it's not masterable. Like it is like the immovable object that you will never get on top of it.
Yeah, it's like there's they're like the potential for like I realize I go through like phases, you know, where I get like call them like maybe a kick or something, you know, where you're like you know when you're younger you just were just going through them and stuff, like it's like some spell where you're just like really focused on some particular subject or you know something that was like it was exciting for you like because you're learning, so then you like go real deep into it and then like it fades and then eventually you have this perspective where you're going like, oh yeah, I was really into that, you know, for a little while. And it's almost like, in a way, it's like, I feel like with music, there's like, it just like endless possibilities that go down these little rabbit holes where it's like, you're exploring and you can learn and get something out of it. And even when, you know, in it, like, if you think it's like, yeah, you know everything you need to know about it or whatever, it's like, if you get on that right, like, fucking path, you can like discover that how are you supposed to know what you're going to be surprised by if you don't, you know what I mean? Like you don't know it's going to be there when you're going like, okay, well, I was really like got into recording with these mixers or whatever with these limiters, and it just sort of like blossomed into an appreciation for transformers, which I was always just
Yeah.
like, ugh, I don't want to deal with that,
Yeah.
like it just like everything should just be solid state, and then it's like you get into that, and you're going like, well, I'm not trying to build with transformers, but now I'm like. Now, when it comes to guitar amps or stereos or microphone preamplifier, and there's like people are hawking like the transformer, this and that about it, and like I now have like I feel like my appreciation has broadened because of that phase where I'm like, man, I appreciate that, like I get that, like the quality, the effects of these transformers, and their they might be subtle differences, but it's those subtle differences I feel like as in a recipe of all the things coming together about that amplifier or that preamp or whatever, that it makes it have this like mojo that in the right time and place can be like the key to unlock a door where you just like recorded some cool ass shit,
Yeah.
or you just have the confidence to do something with that, and it's like a brand new amp that's got some vibes to it, all of a sudden you're playing a lot more because of it. You get a new guitar, and I already got a 6-string guitar, but you get this new one, and you're going like, this one feels a lot different, and I kind of like really like playing this like every day now, and I'm kind of like finding myself like I'm kind of like plateaued. Like, where else can I go? And then you start looking into, and you're like a student for life if you really get into it. But I also do know what you're saying, that there's like, you've like, sometimes you like realize like, oh, some folks can be like, just like in a very focused niche for appreciating this. And it's only for that certain, like what they get out of it, and it that works for them. But like I find it to be almost like this like compulsion in my life where I'm like
Sometimes I'm like jealous.
I'm like happy to never be satisfied, but I'm also sort of like envious of those who like weren't good enough at it. They just gave up and they moved on with something else in their life that was like they weren't pursuing this like breadless endeavor, like where you're just like, yeah, like I just get better at it by spending lots of more money that I'll never get back. It's like gear acquisition syndrome, and it's like phases of that too. I feel like seeing things, it's like, man, like they just keep making new stuff, and then I'm like looking at like things and going like, oh, I see through that. Like I already got mine. I already got like a new synthesizer. Just going like, I know what's up with that. Like I'm sure if I was in that phase, I'd be tempted by that. But I'm like, oh, I've got the thing that does polyphony. I've got something I can. It's not just a mono synth, or I've got a mono synth. Oh, they got a new mono synth out, and you're just going like, yeah. And it's like with effects pedals too. Like it just feels like embracing this like a compulsive phase, knowing that it will end, but then like knowing that like or at least for me, like I'm going to gain wisdom from that will prevent me from maybe overindulging in the future, because you're like oh, I mean, come on, man, like there's so much room for character in an effects pedal. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different ways you can build them and then just like put this like vibe to it, but it's like the effects of those types of devices, again, subjective, where it's like some people like it sounds like shit, where another person like that's exactly the sound that I want. And it just feels like this endless potential where like they can just keep on making new pedals and it's not going to run out, because like you're just going to catch people at different phases. Like, well, I'm no longer in that phase where I'm going to be buying a bunch of pedals, but someone else, how many millions of people are entering that stage today?
Well, people never leave it. Like,
yeah,
I got into it when I was at my most active playing music in my 20s. I didn't have the money to like buy stuff regularly, or if I did, I'd spent it all on booze. So like I just didn't buy shit. Like I just didn't prioritize it. So like I usually always had like my one guitar that worked, my one amp that worked, and like a couple pedals, and maybe like once every year, every couple years, I might get like one new one. And it usually wasn't like, it wasn't a real nice one. It was just like, it was never like over $100. $100 pedal was like a big deal. And that was fine. But then it wasn't until a couple years ago when I started to like be able to actually like spend the money and experiment a little bit. and then I went like way too far in the other direction and bought like way too much shit, and I got I got it way into like figuring out amps, and like I think part of it is that like I always have to like have some new thing I have to figure out, so like learning how to build an amp and like how it works and all that stuff like played a big role, but it also played a big role in me like understanding like how the ones I already have work, and like what's the difference between this one and this one, and like why does this do this and this does this, and like why. But then unfortunately, like at the end of all that, of like I finally had to realize too, it's like I don't do enough with this to where I really need this shit. Like when I play out, if I don't play out that much anymore, but when I do, like it's in like dive bars where like it doesn't sound that good no matter what you have.
Yeah.
So it's like a $300 fuzz pedal is kind of lost on like the way I'm using it when I play with music with other people, or like. So it was a similar thing of like when you talk about like too many microphones on the drums, there's maybe like too many options, and you just get, lost. Same thing was like too many pedals on the board. It was like I'm spending too much time trying to figure out how am I going to shoehorn in this univibe, and not like how am I going to play this song well. And so then I pared it down a lot more. Like I have it. I did buy one pedal finally this year. I didn't buy anything at all this year. I was gonna make it through like full year. I'm not buying shit. But then I like Walrus got me with a Black Friday deal on like their one delay pedal, and it's cool. But it doesn't even do that much. And it's like it's great. I'm not like shitting on Walrus for it. It's a good pedal, but it's just one of those things where it was just like I got it on like a Black Friday deal for like $100. Before that I was thinking about buying like a carbon copy or something. Like similarly priced, because it was just like. Once again, it's just like I don't know, for my needs, I don't think I really need like a super expensive, like super deluxe delay pedal. I just don't. I just need something that's gonna make a couple repeats, and this does that. It's just like this doesn't really do a whole lot else, and it's like it's normally like $200, and I get why it is, but it was one of those things where it was just like for my needs, this doesn't really move the needle much further than if I would have gotten the cheap one. I'm glad I got the nice one because it is nice. But it was just one of those realizations of like, this is real nice, but like, I don't necessarily, if it wasn't on sale, I wouldn't have needed like a real nice pedal, because like, it's just, it doesn't do that much for me at this point.
Man, delay pedals that was like sort of like I feel like that was the thing where I was like, man, like there's so many options out there for delay pedals, and I feel like there's so much like room for like I to this day I still feel inspired by like the idea of messing around with delay in terms of like designing the like a pedal and the interfacing with it, because it's like, you know, a lot of delays.
Funnest one.
Yeah, like there's you hear something going on. It's not subtle. It can be subtle, but it's like the concept of the delay can give you its shortest delay times, and with modulation you get like you get chorus and stuff like that, and then you get like far out there and it's just like not even like usable, but yet if you got the right, if it's like the knobs are spaced right, or you got the right kind of like special switching, you could give something that an artist or yourself can like discover sounds, and then have like a little thing that they do with that pedal. They're like, oh, I like to close that one song out where I'm like, it's got this momentary switch where I hold that down, the tails feedback ramp up, and then I let go, and then the swell comes down, and it's like, well, not all delay pedals do that, and it's like some delay pedals are just, it's on now, you've got your time and everything's fixed unless you change the knobs, and it's like, you know, if you're playing guitar on stage and it's like, well, you like squat down.
I used to.
And it's like that sort of up and down. It's like a sacrifice, because you almost like have to, like, oh, you know, it's like a lot of people like to use their hands with their pedals, and so it's like, but like rarely, you know, if you. Yeah, it's like seems strange if you see someone with like a stand and like they're playing guitar and like they activate them by hand. And I've seen it. I've seen that before. And you're just going like
Nels Cline do that shit.
I'm like, I get it, because it's like there's a lot you can do with these knobs and buttons, but then it's like such a weird, like, because sometimes you're just like, now this one is just for, I just need a foot switch on this thing, and that's all that's going to do. And but like with delay pedals, it's like, dude, those things can be like so useful for bread and butter, meat and potato, simple operations, you know, for guitarists, for example. And then also for guitarists, they can be something that's like wild and trippy and can benefit from like a lot of hands-on shit where you're like, maybe they are going to put a little thing up there so they can have the pedal right in their face, or they have no they go up and down a lot and they're squatting down there and they like turning all those knobs and stuff, and there's just a lot of like, you know, a lot of simple design delay pedals out there, but then when you start getting the ones that get, you know, there's like sometimes they just go so over the top with features that you're almost like in paralysis, and you're like, oh, I just like doing that one little trick with it, and you've got like all these features like what's the one like Chase Bliss, you know, like those pedals, those things are so like impressive and like have so much potential.
Instruments.
But they're like, it almost would just be like, man, like if you even got to a point where you had a certain sound you got out of that you really liked, there's probably like the feeling of there's like a guilt there where you're going like, I'm like using probably like a fraction of this pedal in a certain way. And that was a big investment, and it's like I'm doing it just for that one thing. And I just like, I wish I could use, I wish I could have 5 of these so I could calibrate each one to do its own little unique thing that it can do. But I don't want to have 5 of these, you know. It's like, so there's like this sort of thing that really inspired me, and I think I still have it to like for the future and everything. But trying to design things where it's like there's a group of people out there that's looking for this kind of idea and how you could use it. And the delay pedals are just like, there's so many different approaches you can go with, like a simple, the PT2399 Echo delay chip. A lot of shit out there uses that, but it's like, it just doesn't feel like it's been maxed out yet.
I remember when I first started buying them, I was like, I thought I wanted like the real wild out there stuff. Like I bought like the Earthquaker Afterneath, which is a fucking weird pedal. Like it does so much. It's cool. It's really fucking cool. But I didn't. Nothing I play like uses it. It was just like I couldn't. And I kept trying to like shoehorn it in, but it was just like by the time I get in a room with 3 other people playing music, like this just doesn't work in the equation, and it doesn't add anything. And then I'm spending too much time trying to find a sound in this that I'm going to use versus like, let me find what I'm going to play. And so then I finally had to just realize it's like, I think I just like kind of basic stuff, but because it's tricky there, because I like when other people use the crazy stuff. Like I like hearing it, and it's like, sometimes I'm like, I would like to be able to use that, but I just can't think of like, where's it going to go? Like I got this delay pedal because like, I have the Cattle and Bread Bell Epoch thing that's like an Echoplex, but it has a boost in it too. So I use it more as like a lead boost with like a little slapback. But then I was like, well, now I need a delay that doesn't have a boost in it, so I can also have the repeats, which is where I ended up getting this thing. And this, it has some cool other things in it too. But it was a nice realization, I guess, to have this year of like, I don't actually need like all this crazy shit. But you know, then you always want more stuff. Like it's the same, like you're saying. It's like I'm always like, once a week I'll decide a different kind of guitar that I want, and I'll like look at it for a while, and I'll pull it up on Reverb, and I'll start rationalizing like, I can afford like yada yada yada. And I'm like, I really can't, but I bet I can make that work. And then I'm just like, I don't need that. Like I play the Telecaster and I play the SG. For one, it's like I shouldn't buy anything until like I fix up that Strat, because that thing needs a bunch of work. Like that thing needs new tuners, it needs a refret, I'd like to upgrade the pickups in it, and like no reason to buy another guitar until that one's working. But like it's like I use 2 of those out of like, how many's in this room? What, 8? If you were including the bass,
shy of 8. A dozen, but pretty close.
But it's like they're all in various states of disrepair except for those 2. So it's like those are the 2 that work, and then the bass is fine, but like the other ones all need shit done to them, if not like total rebuilds. But that means I shouldn't buy another one, because I've got like 5 projects sitting here that need
just
to get
waiting
done. I don't know how
waiting for them rainy days.
I don't know how I got the idea to try and build an amp, because at one point that seemed to me like complete fucking sorcery. And I was just like, I have no understanding of like how that works. So like, what makes that? It seemed like the craziest thing in the world to me. And then like, I think it was my friend Kyle has this Champ that our friend Jim built, And I was like, whoa, he built an amp? And like he's known stuff about electronics since he was a little kid. But then I was like, well, that means it's doable. Like if he did it, like it can be done. So I started reading up more and more on it, and then it just seemed less and less daunting the more I like kind of watched some videos and kind of like looked at what stuff did. And then I also realized too, it's like I'm never going to be able to afford to buy this, but I can probably afford to buy like the parts,
like a kit,
and put it together. Like I'm never going to have, never is a strong word, but like it's not anytime soon going to be in a position to spend like $1,000 on a 5-watt amp. But I can spend a few $100s on like parts, and also with the investment of like I'm spending this money, but I'm learning a skill, and that just felt a little better to me. Where I fucked up was like I bought it and I was like, I think I'm gonna build this and I'll try and give it to your. I told Megan, I was like, I'll try and give it to your uncle because like they do a lot of stuff for us and they're cool. So I was like, if it works, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to do it. But then she like tells her hand like, yeah, he's gonna build him an amp, and I was like, fuck. now I have to.
Yeah.
And the shitty part is like I built it and it works, but like it's not safe enough to like give it to him. Because then I built that one and that one's better, but now I need to go back and rebuild the first one before I could give it to the guy. Because it's like,
what kind of things would make it unsafe?
The wiring is like way too janky in it, and it comes like the soldering is not good. The wiring like is just like real messy, and it's real easy for like something to come off or like come disconnected. And so in a tube amp too, like there's a lot of the filter capacitors or all will hold a charge.
Yep.
And that can kill you.
Yeah.
So and like I don't want that possibility in there. And I also put it in like an old suitcase record player to use the speaker in it, which is a cool idea until you figure out that like, well, the way that I put it in there, it would be really hard to get that out of there without like your fingers going into the chassis.
Uh-huh.
And like that's where you might touch that piece that'll kill you.
Yeah, some fat juiced up capacitors.
And there's been times too where it's like it doesn't work this day, but if you shake it, then it starts working, which tells me that like something's not right. And you generally don't want to give an amp to somebody where something's not right. So like I haven't found the time to do it, but I need to eventually like just not gut it, but like one thing is like it'd be easier. The camera probably won't see this, but bend this thing over. In it, like these wires are not trimmed down like they are in this.
So you got some like excess kind of bunched up wires, and
you don't want that. But at the time, I was afraid to cut them because I was like,
what if I cut it too short?
Yep, I'm gonna make a mistake, and then I'm gonna have to come back and do this again. But it's all a learning process.
Yeah.
Even this one, like, I constantly have to like fix things a little bit in that one as they go. Like connections come loose because I didn't solder it very well to begin with, or things like that. But it's like, I don't know. That's how you learn.
Man, failure is like it's like embarrassment and failure, and like the stress that comes with like problem solving when there's really no one there to bail you out. It's like those things are like some of the best ways that like if you can ride that storm out, like the benefit just seems to be like hands down like all in your favor, because like once you go through that stress once, when it happens again, it'll still be kind of stressful, but you'll go like, oh, I remember like I slept, I took, and the next day I looked at it, and then I got a little bit closer. And sometimes like I don't solve problems, but it's like a lot of the times just being like, like, all right, like, I'll just like try my best with this. And then like a lot of times things have worked out, and then you're just like, whoa. And like the stress and the worry and the anxiety that came with like, being in a circumstance where like you built something that's not working right, eventually it's like you really kind of get like, thick skin to problems, and then troubleshooting becomes almost kind of fun because you're almost like, oh, like almost kind of like, all right, where's the problem at? And you're like, well, now I understand how to sniff it out. I know where to start. You know, I know where, well, if I got sound coming in here, but no sound coming out here, where it's lost somewhere in between, you know, and then, then you're going, well, this is the power section. And it's like, okay, well, I've got everything on power end seems to be, and you start accumulating like these like tools in your tool bag where it's like, suddenly it's almost kind of like, sometimes I kind of think one of my favorite things about electronics is just the fact that it gives me confidence to maybe fix something, you know, and like I get like in kicks where I like looking at broken shit on eBay and just being like, I could probably fix that, you know.
Well, it's like you think about it in the terms of like, at least with these, with like stuff like that amp or whatever, it's like it's pretty unlikely that there would be a situation where it's like not fixable, where it's not going to work at all. Like there's a way to make it work. You just have to figure out where your problem is and what it is. And like a lot of things are like that. And that, like, I've had that with electronics where I got a little over my head. Like I have like, I think we got rid of it, but we had this little like stereo thing that had like a cassette player in it and shit. And at one point I was like, I'm going to refurb this. I'm going to open it up, but it's a solid state piece. So I was like, there's too many fucking parts in this. Like, I don't know what's what. Like or like the console that I have downstairs, I got that for like $40 off Facebook Marketplace, and once again it's solid state. And at first I was like, I'm gonna gut the stereo out of this. I might still do this, because I know I could at least recap it. But then it was just like, I gotta get it out of here. I gotta get it upstairs. I gotta figure out what the parts are that I need. I gotta order them. Then I gotta figure out how to get them out. It's just like, I don't know where to find the problem is, and it's like, this is gonna be a lot. And then it's like, maybe I'm better off just gutting this and replacing it, but then I got to find one that's going to fit it. So for now, I just gave up and I just used the speakers in it. I just ran those to another receiver, and even those need new caps on them because like crossovers, which I didn't understand what that was until this being broken made me understand how these work. Was like, get old school speakers, those are the same way, where you got that like tweeter and then you got the big part. It's like there's a cap.
Little filter cap.
Yeah, little filter cap, and that's what's telling it like this signal goes to this, and these frequencies go here, these go here. And when those caps are bad,
it blows the speakers. Now it's getting too much of that frequency.
Right. And so it's like, oh, now because this thing is fucked up, now I understand why this works this way, and now I can fix it.
Remember those yellow speakers being used with Boss DJs days?
Yeah.
So those were Pioneers, like home theater like speakers, and those things had like you know, in the time when I was dealing with those, I think it was like the tweeters and the mids would blow out, but the woofer would would still work.
Yeah.
And what was happening was the little capacitor that was in there, I think it was like a 4.7 microfarad. I don't remember the voltage, but like this tiny little capacitor that was like going to like the tweeter, and it would like, that would blow, and then like or just like cause, it would be like, it seemed like that was the weak point where like eventually the tweeters would blow out. And I didn't understand crossovers and stuff like that, where like now just basic electronics is like, oh yeah, just throw in that capacitor in there, it just like traps up some of them stronger frequencies, so then you're not like loading the tweeter with the same frequencies the subwoofer's getting pushed with.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh well, that's easy enough. Now I feel like I could maybe understand a crossover, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet.
It's exactly the way a tone circuit works in a guitar.
Yeah.
That's another way I learned it. It was like that capacitor, all that does is, because it's passive in the circuit, or I don't even know if that's the right word.
Yeah, I mean, it's not powered. It doesn't have any like batteries amplifying what's happening before or after it.
It's just telling it what frequencies go to ground and which ones pass through to the end of the signal. That's all it does when you roll that back. And I was just like, that's it. Like that's all there is to this.
It's like a little like booby trap for frequencies where it just,
you learn like that's all there is in all of these. And like that's how all of these like EQ systems work in all
filters. It's just fucking
just that. It's like there's like 4 different parts in an amp, you know, or like all these things. It's like there's resistors, capacitors, transformers, and
transistors too.
Transistors and tubes.
You might have some op amps if you're dealing with a little solid state hybrid is there, but with like tube amps, Yeah, I mean, you got like tubes acting like several different jobs, but like caps, resistors are pretty well like the bread and butter. You have potentiometers, which are just variable
That's it.
resistors.
That's all it is.
And it's like, yeah, then you start like the block aspects of these things, you know, are kind of like once you get your head around that, you're going like, oh man, like, oh, there's an input stage.
Yep.
You know, there's like there's the stage, there's the power section, there's the stage that like takes your signal and makes it the big juice. And then it's like, so like with solid state amps, it's like kind of like, oh man, like I really like look at those and just like, okay, you got op amps in here working on the front end as the input, dealing with that. You've got your tone section, which is just filtering frequencies and amplifying and you know, juggling all that. And then you got this output stage with like solid state where it's, you know, like a lot of these things will just be like amp chip. It would just be like just this chip, you know, up against a big heat sink and just like ins and outs in the power pins. And it's like real simple. And it's like, oh man, like I can really wrap my head around this kind of amp. Dude, like tube amps are still like magical to me. I get it,
They're so
but
simple.
but it's like the voltage that they play with is like it's big league, you know. Where like when you're working with the chips, it's like everything just seems to be like on board, low voltage, and then when you get to your chip that's like putting out the juice, it's still like it just like power in, power and then signal in, signal out, and it's like a transformer maybe or whatever, but you know, I was just wondering this. I don't know. Maybe you might be able to answer it. So I've got the orange, the Micro Terror, and that's got a tube in it.
Yep.
I'm imagining that tube doing the front end, like the input kind of gain staging, or that's not doing power pushing.
No, it's all preamp.
So yeah, now that I think about it, I'm like, I think that's got like a chip, like just a little chip in it for the actual amplifying to the speaker.
Yeah, it's probably got a 12AX7 in the pre-tube.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, that's what most amps are gonna have in their preamp section. That one is a 12A-Y7 in the first position. When I first built that, I put a 12AX7 in it just because that's what I had handy. I have a shitload of them. Because also, side note, you can find tubes all over the place. When people are getting rid of like little suitcase record players or organs or things like that, they're full of tubes.
Oh yeah.
Pull them out, and they probably work because that shit was built to last. But anyway, so I tried that and that, but it was like way too gainy. Like would get like way too overdriven, way too fast, and then you like 'cause different 12A whatever 7 tubes have different levels of gain. 12AX7 being the highest. That's what's in that. Yeah, that's all that's in that, and it's just like when you see like a tube pedal, like overdrive pedal. Sometimes they'll be like, it's got a tube in it. That 12AX7 tube that's in it is just basically acting like a transistor. It's just a gain stage. So, and when they're just cascading into each other. The first one in an amp is the one that has the most effect on what your end sound is.
Yeah, because it's like really playing with the gain staging of it, and then like that's affecting all kinds of, whether there's filters shunting that low end or.
And in an amp, they're usually being split. I don't really understand enough of this to like explain it well. Uncle Doug does on YouTube.
Yeah.
But they're usually using like one side. It's usually it's going in one side and then going out into like some of your EQ stuff and then back into the other side of it. So like a 12AX7 is really kind of like two tubes in one. Because like this little guy, this is like a mid-50s no-name amp that I bought at Lynx, but these two tubes here are doing what one 12AX7 would do.
Oh, like so it's like the 12AX7's got like 2 plates or something in it.
Something like that, yeah. I don't remember exactly what it is. This thing needs a repair at this point too. It's something's fucked up. I've fixed that thing I don't know how many times. That was how, now that I think about it, that's how I got started with trying to figure out how to build an amp, because I bought that thing for $100 at Lynx, and I was like, I've always wanted one of these little no-name 50s tube amps. But you used to be able to get them cheap like that on eBay. I used to look at them when I lived with my parents and be like, I'm going to get one of these one day because like I'm broke, and like that's going to be the way I get a tube amp. Because like these, like nobody knows what these are because they don't have a famous brand on them, but they're probably good. And that was sitting, and then I missed the window, and people started figuring that out,
Yeah.
so they got more expensive.
That bygone era where like
Yeah.
thrifting and like hitting eBay was like, it just was like, you look at it from now and you're just going like, oh man, like the getting was so good back then, I didn't even know it, man.
But then I saw that at Lynx, and this is where you get lucky with some shops sometimes, is sometimes they're still thinking about this stuff the way people did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So he wasn't thinking
Just trying
about,
to get rid of it.
He wasn't thinking about it like somebody might think this is a really cool amp. It was just sitting in the corner, like not even on display. It was just sitting in the corner with a sign on it that said like $100, like works. Had a 3-prong thing, but it was like, hey man, can I try that? And it sounded fine. What's the end of that? Sounded fine. So I took it home and it's been great. But every now and then I need to like replace something on it. Like I had to replace the power tube, and then I had to like. At one point, there was something wrong. I figured it was with the tube socket. So then I was just like, well, how do you fix that? I was like, if I take it somewhere to get it done, that's going to cost whatever money. Probably, definitely more than what I spent on the amp, which I'm fine with. But I was just like, I don't want to do that. If I can figure it out myself. And then, like, you just look up diagrams and stuff, and it's like, oh, well, you just buy this part, and then like
It's just however many pin socket you need to get for a tube or whatever.
Well, plus, it's like if I'm replacing the part, really all I have to do is like take a picture of how it was in there.
Yeah.
And then put the other one in the same way. But then it's like it doesn't fit, so I got to drill holes. I got to figure something else out. And then while I was in there, I replaced all the caps.
Yeah, I was gonna say caps are a big one there because you get something that old, it's like your bad caps would be killing your
I still need
tubes.
to replace the filter cap in it because it has one of those old school cap cans.
Yeah.
And at the time when I did all that, I didn't understand how to replace that with a new one, and I still don't. But I do know how to look it up now. Like I think I understand it, but I can never remember if
Where it's
those,
like a couple caps in one canister or
so
something.
these big cans. You see these in all kinds of old stuff.
Yeah, I've seen like where people restoring it, they like stuff them to keep the look the same.
Yeah, you can do that.
Or you could just like, whatever, just like you just got to put
What
in
I
the
always
equivalent.
forget is like if the caps that are in that can are wired in series or parallel. I think they're parallel, but I'm gonna look it up again before I do it. I think the last time I looked it up, it was like somebody was like they're parallel because they all share a ground. I don't know.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So if they're parallel, it means all of the negative polarity connections are all in line. So if those are all
Right.
going to ground, so then all your grounds would be in series.
So then I just go look
Or
up what the
parallel.
values are, and I think you have leeway. I think with the values of them, but it's going to affect the way it sounds. Like different levels of capacitance are going to affect how much low end is coming through and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's for later on in the winter.
Then you can experiment with putting like different ones and have them switched, where you can just like toggle a switch and.
Right now, it just buzzes real loud. Like the last time I plugged it in, it was like because I let it sit in my car for like 6 months. I plugged it in, it's just like. So something's wrong. I don't know. I took it to the jam night and then I just never took it back out of my car.
You mentioned Uncle Doug. That's a YouTuber, and I've gone deep into all the like. There's so many of them, but like I've collected this like sort of like all these resources that like are like like entertainment in a way for me, because a lot of times it's shit that I'm not even dealing with. But like the Uncle Doug stuff, I watch a lot of Uncle Doug despite not having. I have that that tiny Terra or micro Terra, but that's like tube amps that are just like I'm not even trying to do this, but this stuff is interesting to me. I'm trying to learn through osmosis almost.
I do that with like the Rob Robinette has this site. It's been around forever, and I use that to build that and the other amp. But I still go to it and read it all the time. Of just like even stuff I'm not trying to do, I'll just like read it just to like I want to get another understanding of this. So recently, like a month or two ago, I put a master volume in that, and I used his site to do it because that's like one of the mods he talks about. And it's once again, it's like you think about like, oh, how do you put a master volume? Like that sounds really difficult, and then they realize like, no, you're just replacing a resistor that's already in the circuit with a potentiometer. Like that's all it is.
Is that like after like the input stage and all that, and it's just like what's feeding the amp like pushing the speaker?
There was like two different ways to do it. There's like a pre-phase inverter or post-phase inverter. I did pre, and I forget what was different about the process of doing the post one. In this amp, it recommended doing the pre one because there's like a certain type of distortion you can get at a certain point when it's up too loud that can be a little unpleasant. So with doing it pre-phase inverter, if you just back it off a little bit, then that kills that and it makes it more pedal friendly. Which I haven't had a chance to test because I can't turn it up here past like 0. So, but that's why I wanted to put a master volume in it, because then I can turn the master volume all the way down and I can turn up the preamp volume and get a little more juice out of it at like a reasonable volume.
Yeah.
Whereas before I could not do that at all. And then that made me realize too that like on every amp that has a master volume like this one, that gain knob all the way to the right that we think of as being the distortion, that's really just what the volume knob would be if you didn't have a master volume.
Yeah.
So like that was what a lot of people would talk about, like, oh, dime the master volume on that and then just use that as your volume. It's like you'll get a different tone out of it or something a little more like old school. It just made me like understand just a little bit more about like how that works.
A lot of times I feel like I'll like be like driving the gain all the way up and then using the volume to like tame it so that I can like get this thickness of distortion, but then also get like the volume of which is just sort of like I'm just sitting here jamming next to the amp, you know. I just kind of want to hear like this. What would this sound like if I've just saturated like 100x basically?
Yeah. And with a solid state amp, you're not, I mean, they do still overdrive when you turn the volume up really high, but it's not as dependent on the power amp being at a certain level. Whereas on a tube amp, a lot of times you want the power amp to be at a certain level to be getting like the proper sound out of it, supposedly.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like the way you push those types of like parts, you know, has a huge effect on that sound. And I feel like with solid states, like you know, think about like op amps. I just like really focused on op amps with my endeavors in the past, and it just seems like op amps are like so much going on there, but it's like it just like what I learned with that Micro Terror, where it was like it seems like when I tapped in, I put a little mod on it where I put a jack in it before I guess it got to that chip. And it was like, so all the controls and everything still work, but I have like a line out so that I can like, if I crank the gain, it has that sound. But it just seems almost like, I don't know, like the interaction between the parts is just strange, where it feels like when you got like a lot of tubes in something, there's just so much character that comes out pushing all your stages. Yeah. Where like when like you have like a hybrid like the Micro Terror, it almost just feels like, you know, like, you know, that output chip is just only happy in a certain range, and it sounds good here and there, but like pushing it could actually probably be, it's not like you're going to get like butter out of it, you know. It's just like where I feel like with these like high voltage tubes and stuff, you have a lot more sonic potential from like the variances between how you're playing with the gain and the volume.
To an extent, I mean, they don't work that much differently. I mean, like there's a little bit of like mojo in the way people talk about it that I don't know is 100% valid in the actual science of like how it works and how it sounds. And like I watched a video recently where this guy is doing like, where does the tone actually come from in an amp?
I feel like I've seen these videos.
You might have. He deduced it down to the tone stack and where it is in terms of like where the distortion is happening, because he builds like a replica of one of his amps in like a fucking metal box with like no tubes or anything, and it sounds like pretty close. Like it's maybe not 100%, but like enough that like a dive bar is not going to know the difference. So like your average person's not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like your amp in a box pedals get so close to the original thing, because it's like, do the tubes make a difference? I think so, but are they the end all be all of it? I mean, you can have plenty of solid state amps these days like sound just as good.
I feel like in that same that content, I thought I remember seeing too, like a person sort of going into the shape of the cabinet that the amp is in.
Yeah.
And like the speaker placement and like the way the the way that the speakers are inside
he
of
did
it.
one just about speakers.
Yeah.
So that might have been that one.
Yeah, and it was almost like just like ports, not ported. That on a sort of I guess a tangent, but similar. Like recently, I was like researching and schooling myself on the studio monitors. You'll see in a lot of pictures the white coned Yamaha NS10s, and they are like apparently like this, like it was a hi-fi speaker, not a studio monitor, and the shits were just like favored because of their poor performance and giving an idea of like mid-range and like how stuff would sound and more regular, like a person's like stereo or whatever. But reading into those things, it's like kind of crazy just about how much like lore is around those particular things, and just like all the things that you can do to a speaker to make it just be different sounding, from like, oh, it's ported, it's got a hole in it, changes the way the cones base, the woofer moves. It's not ported, it is ported. The way that the cone is made, like these white cones on these NS10s, like a lot of those cones are like pressed and it's like one piece. These shits are like as if you actually made a cone out of a flat sheet of paper, where it's like folded and rolled and then like seamed, and there's like a seam in the speaker, which almost seems like a lower quality thing. But again, those speakers weren't made to be like studio monitors, but I think it was like Bob Clearmountain or something, that like a producer that like used them and was just like infamous for the use of those particular speakers and stuff. And I don't know, I was kind of like, I'm not trying to get me a pair of those. They don't make them anymore. But I did find a Yamaha self-powered. It's got a plug on. I got it at the Goodwill. It's a MS 101-2, and it's got a port in it. But for me, I'm like, I was like my poor man's version of these speakers, even though I know it's performance wise nothing like those.
Yeah.
But like for me, I'm like, I like the idea of using this as like a reference for mono mixing, and then also the just being sort of like sonically, it's kind of like small and flat and boxy sounding. And I'm like, maybe this could be potentially useful in future mixing scenarios, where like if it can sound good on this, or I listen to a reference that I'm going for through that speaker to see what it sounds like on that, then I can kind of gauge how to push my mixing. And maybe if it works on there, then it'll work on the variety of other places like my car, or because using studio monitors is like kind of like, it's sort of misleading, because how many people are listening to like that kind of speaker, people using earbuds, car speakers, and I'm sure people still use hi-fi stereos, but it just feels like kind of a niche thing, really. I don't know how many people really are rocking their stereos that often. I love music, and I'm like, I go through periods of time where I'm not listening to stereo, hi-fi stereo, I have one hooked up, but I don't really, I feel like I get a lot more listening out of earbuds, or just some shitty, like my monitor setup in my studio, which is, meant to be flat as can be, and, I'm not really trying to accentuate bass and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of the main thing of studio monitors, is you want them to be real flat. Like that was something that I had to learn the hard way. Like I said, when I recorded my one band, then I'm at home trying to mix the thing in like regular ass earphones, and like I'm like, I think this sounds pretty good. I'm like, I'm gonna go give it the car test, and I turned on my car and was like, this sounds like goddamn hot garbage. Like the bass was like way out of control.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh man, like god damn it. And like it took me a little bit there figuring that out, and then figuring out too like how to scoop out like all that extra low end you don't need, or like you think when you start doing it that like, oh, a bass guitar is gonna have like a ton of bass in it, but like it actually doesn't. It has like a ton of like low mids in it.
Yeah. That's the magic spot for the bass, is that like kind of like 100, 200.
Kept getting lost, and I was like, I'm getting like the kick drum is getting lost, and then it's just like too like woofy, like what the fuck's going on? And then I carved out all that extra low end out of the bass, and like now suddenly the kick drum is like clear as day, and I was like, oh, like it's really like people had said this to me before, and I never figured it out until I put it into practice, that like a lot of the times it's more about taking away than adding.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
like when you're doing EQ work, it's like a dangerous territory to be bumping up. You know, it's almost
Yeah.
like most of the time you want to be like trying to pull down.
yeah.
And
And that was, well, then taking it full circle back to like when I had to do sound at the Circle, like when I first started doing that, that was a big learning part there of like how to, because I fell into that. It was basically like nobody here knows how to set up a PA. So that's, I guess suddenly it's my job.
I like to watch Dave Rat videos.
Yeah, and it was just like, what the fuck do I do? And it took me a long time to learn that, like, oh, what you're doing is carving out like the problem frequencies. You don't really need to boost anything. Like, you just kind of just take out the stuff that's not working.
Yeah.
And that's all you really have to worry about. Like, all you can really do is fuck it up, I guess is the way to put it. Like, if you start boosting stuff, that's when you're going to start causing problems versus solving problems. In reason. I mean, sometimes you do need to give something a little touch. I remember, like, this happens with sometimes with the way a band will do stuff. Whereas I remember, like, this band came in, nice guys, but they wanted to set up with all of their amps like facing them, in front of them, facing them, and they wanted me to mic all the amps, so that then like the audience would just be getting like the mix from the PA, but they're using their amps as monitors. And I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. But I was in my head, I'm like, that's not a good idea. But like, it actually worked out okay, except nothing we do, like, you can't hear the guitar. Like, guitar's not, and I have it like jacked up in the PA, and then finally I'm like, they're on a break, and I'm like, let me take a look at your amp real quick, and I'm like, dude, you have all your mid range scooped out. Like, and he's like, what? I'm like, you gotta put some mids in this. I was like, I'll boost the mids a little in the PA, but like, you gotta put some mids on your amp. And I was like, your low end is getting lost in the kick drum and the bass guitar, and your high end is getting lost in the cymbals. Like, you have nothing. You have no frequencies going on here that are not in other instruments. So like, that's why we can't hear your guitar.
Is there like isn't it like sort of like a metal thing? I feel like I remember this like kind of like a metal guitar playing where they're just like
sort of is,
take the middle away and just full blast the other ones.
Because it gets boosted elsewhere. I mean, kind of like that comes from, I think, mostly from Pantera, and like that guy would scoop out. Well, the other thing is, when people say mid range, like, they're not considering like how wide of a frequency band,
yeah, like how sharp that Q is.
Yeah, so like he cut out certain mids, but then he boosted other ones. So like he used an MXR EQ pedal.
Oh, okay. So you really kind of shape that. Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly what it was, but you can look it up and people show you. But like, yeah, he did like cut the shit out of his mids, but he also boosted other ones. But also like, they had a front of house engineer who's like also EQing the sound, or like on the records, like that stuff's getting processing, and in the mixing process, I imagine the producer is like pushing the mid-range on his stuff, because I mean, guitar is a mid-range instrument. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like voice, guitar, like these things are like really like to sit in that like 2K, you know.
Yeah, like he's cutting some stuff out, and like you can hear it if you sit down. Like if I take that Metal Zone pedal, and like, that is an interesting pedal. It gets written off as a piece of shit all the time.
I've seen videos on YouTube kind of joking about using it for everything and like all the different like ways you can use it.
Because it's really easy to make it sound terrible.
Yeah, like it's just like this like chainsaw kind of buzz sound. If
this one's modded, I don't know what this kid did to it. He sold it to me for $20, and he added all
hard
this
to
stuff
beat that.
it. Yeah.
Probably just like shorting out resistors or bypassing caps or something.
All this different stuff on it, but like what makes it really fun and a good learning tool is the EQ on it is crazy powerful. Like it can cut and boost by 15 dB. And you got high, you have low, you have mids, but then you have your mid frequency where like it goes from 200 to 5K, where it's like you select that and then you select how much you're boosting and cutting of that. So like you can kind of get a little bit of an education on like how this stuff works just with this little guy. And like I said, it's very powerful. Like you nudge it a little bit, you got a lot of change. So it's really easy to make it sound horrible. And the gain in it doesn't sound that great. So you don't want to have like a shit ton of gain. Who the fuck is bugging me? Sorry. No.
It's all good.
Nothing important. So that's, and also it's like if you want a parametric EQ pedal, let's get one of these. Just turn the gain all the way down.
Man, the utility factor of Boss pedals is just so like just legendary. I feel like there's so many flavors and seasonings there. The buffering stuff, it's like you kind of like realize like, man, like so some of the versatility of some of the just basic options are just like you like come back to it and you're going like, oh man, I'm so glad I've got this. Like,
it's funny how much our perception of this stuff changes over time, because when I was a kid getting guitar magazines, like Boss, what, like I didn't know what pedals were until I saw advertisements in Guitar World for them, and I remember seeing the Boss ones, and it was like, well, this is clearly a pedal. This is where you step, and this is the thing. Like, it didn't have the button like they all do now.
yeah,
and it was just like, this was my model for like what
pedals
a pedal is, but I couldn't afford these. But I could get the Ibanez Sound Tank. Those were like $40.
There's that like plastic shell.
Yeah, but they're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time I didn't know how to use it. I bought the Tube Screamer because I heard that's what Stevie Ray Vaughan used, but I didn't understand that it wasn't a distortion pedal. I didn't know the difference between overdrive and distortion, so I was like, why doesn't it sound like Metallica now?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is going on? And like, didn't understand it. And then like, fast forward, I bought this also like, how old was I when I bought this? I was probably 22, 23. Early on in the, I remember I had this when the Johns played at Bellisimo's, so this is a long time ago, and I bought it for $40, and it's still fine. Like, it's still great. Like that's like almost 20 years.
They're built like tanks.
And yeah, it's even been modded. Like, same kid that modded that one. Like, I let him borrow this, and he like modded this one out, and like, I don't even remember. I remember this gives it like LED clipping at one point, and then it does something else. I don't know what this does. It sounds great. It's awesome. And like, at one point then later on, I got into like the boutique stuff, and I kind of started to look down on these a little bit. I think everybody did at a certain point. And now there's this like reappreciation happening for these, because it's like, really, like, you can get everything you need from the Boss lineup. Like, I went, there's a band around here, Pale Barn Ghost, who like probably my favorite local band in this area, and their guitar player, like, his whole board is nothing but Boss pedals. He sounds incredible.
Yeah, man. It's like, if you know what you're doing with them, I mean, like, there's just the sky's the limit with the options that they have. They got some weird shit too, but like, even like the most like utility things, like the tuner pedal. I have like the TU2.
Yeah, me too.
And it's like, I keep coming back to that for like these experimental ideas. Like, you can use that thing as like a mute switch, so that like you can, on like a Behringer mixer, it's got those insert jacks, so it's basically just an out and then like a return back in, and so you can run that into the pedal, and so your signal that's going into the mixer goes through that insert, goes down into your tuner pedal, and then you can use the tuner pedal like in the bypass mode, so when you click it in, it's like cuts off the signal so it doesn't return back into the mixer board. And I haven't applied the concept yet, but I really want to use that, say, like if I was recording with a looper, like live drums, right? So like the looper's recording in that 2-measure loop or whatever, but the input is being muted through this setup, and I can just have like this tuner pedal by the drum kit, so like I hop on the kit, I hear the loop in my head, and I'm like, I get warmed up, and then when I'm ready to do it, just like use the tuner pedal to open it up, unmute it. Now, I'm not certain if you what the noise would be in that, if you gain like clicks or anything like that. Not certain. And then the other thing I thought that it would be useful for, I just realized, I was going to build a spluffer, which is in this like book that really kind of got me started with like op amps and stuff, by Craig Anderton. But it's like, it's basically like a splits your signal and puts buffers on that and uses buffers and all that, but just basically it's like he's like, it's not like it does any special tricks, but it just basically splits your signal into two, and it prepares it for long runs and messing with other pedals and all that. But I've always neglected that one because I was like, it just was such a basic utility, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna build one of those, I need it. And I'm like, I think the Boss tuner does that, because you've got an input and then you've got an output and a bypass. So like the bypass, I feel like, would just be like always just taking your signal buffered and going out. So I was like, okay, so with recording guitar, you could use this in the front of your chain to split off a clean signal for like your direct recording, and then the actual effect output goes into your signal chain, your effects pedals, and so you can kind of get the clean signal for later messing around with reamping, and then also capture whatever sound you're trying to get out of your setup. And I'm like, dang, I don't even have to build a circuit. I mean, I'll just use the tuner pedal.
That tuner pedal I have in here, I bought before I bought that. So I've had that even longer, and it's fine. There's nothing, like when I was in my pedal buying frenzy a couple years ago, I kept looking at like fancy tuner pedals, like Peterson makes these like real nice ones, and I was like, I should get that. And I'm like, why? I've had that since I was not even old enough to drink, I think. Like, and it's fine.
Yeah, it was one of my first ones. I feel like I had like I bought the DS1, was probably my first Boss.
And those are killer too. People like that. That's having a renaissance now too. But like for a long time, people wrote those off as like they suck. No, they're great. They sound awesome.
I loved how it was like $40 retail price, and it was always affordable. And it was like, hey, I saw pictures of Kurt Cobain using this. You know, I'm like, okay, like it's like this is so cool how accessible this is. And then like in comparison to other pedals, it would be like it started to fall short quite often. Like I was like, oh man, I like using this other pedal because the DS1's got just this like extra background noise I don't like in between stuff. And I'm like, and all of a sudden it's like, but I've never wanted to get rid of it. And then there's also so much potential for modifying them. I've never modded mine, but like I've like a lot of times have like considered maybe buying another one so I could experiment.
Post 2017, you can't because the boards are different.
Oh snap!
Yeah.
Was it like really small surface mount stuff?
Something like that. Yeah. And same with these, like the ones with these after 2016, you can't mod. This was one of the first.
Oh man, they have to be modifiable. They have to be. I gotta figure that. Where they got epoxied? Where they like Klon Centaur on that shit now?
I don't know. This one, the first pedal mod I ever did, I think Jason told me about it. Was clipping the C6 capacitor out of it. And I did that. I think it changed it. I don't remember. And then I gave it, like I said, to that kid. Not even a kid anymore. The dude named Kyle. I sold him my PV Windsor head, and he was like, "Oh, you want me to mod that pedal for you?" I'm like, "Sure." And it's just like I didn't even ask him what he was gonna do. It was just like, "Go for it. These are so cheap. I don't care. Like if I don't like it, I'll just buy another one." And like I definitely like it. I don't remember at this point how different it sounds from the original one, and I don't even know if it has. It might even have the stock setting in it. I don't remember. He told me what these switches do, but it was like 7 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty inspired by the whole like seeing like mods onto these pedals, and I've contemplated it, but it seems like once I got down into the trenches with like the circuit boarding, I'm almost like have gotten to this other side, not scared, but almost just going like, oh well, if I really like that, I'm like I probably could just like find a way to like almost like clone it and experiment with it in that way, where like a lot of those mods are just so within reach and understanding where you're just like getting rid of a capacitor, bypassing a resistor, switching diodes to something else.
And this is like pretty, I think, I don't know enough about these, but from what I understand, this is basically a tube screamer, just with like some slight different. I think like one of them.
Oh, it's got the JRC 4558 dual op amp in there.
I don't know, but one of them has symmetrical clipping and one of them has asymmetrical clipping, and I don't know or really care what the difference is between those. I mean, it does to me what I would expect a tube screamer to do. I've never actually owned a tube screamer, but I've had this, and I've had like the EHX copy, and I don't know. It's just kind of cool. You
ever been on electrosmash.com? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got like a lot of like circuit analysis, and they'd have like the tube screamer on there, and there's a couple other ones on there that were really helpful for. They have the analysis on the PT2399 Echo delay chip, and I remember that one was like tremendous with helping me like go someplace new with something where I was like I'd familiarize myself with it a little bit through a kit, but then I was just like wanted to do more, and it was just like I don't really understand this, and then that site really breaks it down. But then I went into the other pedals that they had, and just like man, like not even like trying to build them or clone them, but like having like shitloads of schematics of these pedals, you're starting to go like, dang, these all have pretty similar setups and certain things, like certain capacitors and certain spots, certain like uses of transistors, input buffers, etc., and then suddenly it was like really helped just like being able to like tackle building something, because you're just going like, most of these use a transistor on the input just as a little buffer, and then it's like, okay, they got an output buffer, and then like you start to see the way they filter stuff and going like, oh, okay, so they're doing that for this reason. And it's like kind of like gaining an understanding of that pedal design from the inside of it, like that has yeah, kind of like spoiled me in a way too, where that's another reason I think my pedal buying the real craziness really died down, because it's like at this point like you almost like see through them, where you're just going like, oh yeah, like it's just like, an elaborate distortion, where you just have a lot of options there,
and a lot of them make their bones about it, and they have to, because I've listened to like Wampler and Josh Scott from JHS both say this, where they're like, we would love to make like original circuits, but like every time we do, people just email like, which one's a fuzz face, which one, like,
yeah, people
want the ones they already know.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think there's just like, there's only so many ways to like
overdrive a solid state set of components,
Yeah, it's like there's only, I mean, you can tweak it and modify it and do little things with it, but like there's only so many different kinds of overdrive pedals.
Yeah, the fuzz pedals with like transistors and stuff like that. Like you can get all kinds of like MIT radical design, get built, like look at the Klon and all these like different feedback sections and stuff. And there's like, it's so exciting thinking about how much potential there is to like just make something that's like different. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it's like that pedal is renowned for being an overdrive pedal, and like it's not like it's doing the science there isn't radical in terms of like, it's like a lot of people are using that for like a special clean boost in a way, you know what I mean? It's like all this stuff goes into it, but it's not like it's carving out these gnarly, mind-blowing levels of like frequency excursion that just like will change you just hearing it once. It's like just a very lush way of making your sound bigger without getting like this kind of dirt that is just too much dirt or whatever.
Yeah, and like the JHS dude does a good job of like demystifying that stuff.
I think I saw a new JHS video talking about like making another clone, and I was just like, oh man, I haven't watched that one yet, but I'm like,
I haven't watched the whole thing. His deal is like, he used to make one. I don't know if you know the story with him, but like he used to make one, and like the OG guy called him up like kind of pissed off about it, because he like has always been kind of salty about other people making them.
Yeah. There's a lot of clones out there.
But at this time there weren't. I think at the time he's talking about, there weren't many. Like he had his, and there's like maybe one or two others. And he was like, well, look, like you don't make one, and people want it. And he was like, I'll tell you this, like when you start making it again, I'll stop. And so like he eventually came out with the KTR,
the red one.
Yeah, and so then JHS stopped making their clone, and he's like, that was 8 years ago, and he's like, he's a hard guy to get hold of. He doesn't return phone calls, and he's like, my question is like, should I like, has it been long enough? He's like, at this point, he's like, at that time, he was like, there weren't a million of them out there, but he's like, now like everyone has one.
Yeah, man. I mean, it just seems like there's like they're mass producing those overseas in sweatshops for like, you can go on eBay for like $25.
The first one I got that EHX Soul Food first back when I lived at the Wallride House. I bought that, and that's not 100% a clone, but it's definitely based on it. It's definitely based on that, and I loved it. I thought it was cool. And I used that for a long time, but like that was my introduction to it. And then I have this one that like Rubba Pedals made that is a little more accurate. Like she said, it's pretty much like is one. It's got different transistors in it, but it sounds fucking great. And like that's also prevented me from buying any other ones because it's like I already got one.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need another one.
Yeah, once you like scratch the itch, it's kind of hard. It's like it seems like you can. It's like finding satisfaction, even though it's like.
And that one just looks cool.
Yeah.
Like the eyes light up.
The whole story with the Klein Centaur or whatever being built and like the way it was like the story behind that has like such a great like it's like mythology or something,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like really like charming. And one of the factors I think that fed into like my own drive to want to mess around with building was just this idea that like something that you work hard at in small amounts adds up over time, and all of a sudden you've created something that people are like hawking on eBay for thousands of dollars, and it's like, well, I don't know, I don't really want to like say that that's my driving that drives me, but like it's this idea of just like the way people perceive value and how things don't last forever, and that like even if it's just like simple or whatever in small batch, it's kind of like neat to think about, you know, making things that these are tools, you know, and it's like tools, you know, if taken care of right, and even if they're not, I mean, if they're like abused or whatever, it's like a lot of these things are built in 30 years, that pedal's still going to be, you know,
You can replace every part.
yeah, and it's like within reason. It's like there are some pedals that can take a shitload of abuse, and some of them are sensitive, but like for the most part, those tools are like, you know, they can outlast the user's desire to want to use them.
Right. That little amp there, like that was a budget amp in 1955. Like that was, and it's not a nice one. That was for like a beginner or like a kid in 1950. So we're talking what, like damn near 70 years ago.
Jeez.
And like it still works because you can replace every single part in it. Like you can open it up, it's totally point to point. Like there's no circuit board, PCB, there's nothing in there like that like if it breaks, that's toast. Nope, it's just a bunch of shit connected to each other, and you can see all of it, and like if something doesn't work anymore, you can just take it out and put a different one in, and it's fine. And that's how most of these things are. Like, and that, a lot of stuff that's made now is not like that, obviously, because that's why, like, that's not going to last for 70 years. Like, there's parts, like, that PCB could break. Like, there's stuff in that.
Yeah, I guess
can fuck up.
Yeah, when you start getting into, like, printed circuit boards, you start getting into proprietary designs where it's, like, almost can be, like, you know, there are several things there that, yeah, like, if you...
Like, that'll last a good while. Like,
you can repair a PCB, though.
That orange is built pretty good. But like,
and that's a name too. I would expect there to be some quality in that design
but
too.
But it's also, it's not one of their high end ones. Like those are not super cheap, but it's. I think it's still like the made overseas one. So that's like they're still kind of on the cheaper end, to where like, it's not point to point. Like you can't replace every single thing in it, but like pretty close. You can still probably pretty well repair it.
I'm kind of like I remember that custom tuck and roll guy, and that thing blew up on me, and I was like reamping a snare sound through it to get that spring effect on there, and I took that to like 2 or 3 guys to repair it, and they all just like couldn't do it. And it was like all the local guitar shops at Ling's. It was like Coffee. And I feel like there's like a third one I did too.
Yeah.
Anyway, it seemed like what I remember from that was almost like the issue was like somewhere like one of these transistors or something, and it's like being able to replace that's kind of like, you know, like almost like it's like this idea that these certain parts can be so specifically fitted for this circuit, and that like to find a replacement is, you know, it seemed like a stretch, you know.
Yeah.
Where I feel like now I'm like I kind of wish I had that project in my hands, because I feel like I might be able to figure it out, you know, like find a close equivalent, you know, and like
even if it's not the same thing, it's maybe something that will like it'll still work. Maybe it won't be the same as it was before,
but there should be something out there that should be close enough where that thing could be working again.
There's a mentality with a lot of those shops too, and some of those guys, especially older guys that do that stuff, where it's like it's not worth fixing at a certain point.
Yeah.
Which is like, I don't know that I really agree with that. Like it depends on what it is and like what the user wants to do with it and how much time and money they want to invest in it. But like, because I've thought about that before with like that guitar. It was that needs more work put into it now than it's actually worth. But like, I don't care. I've had it since I was 12. I want it to work. And like, there's probably some places where I would take it and they'd be like, I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not putting money into that or like time into it. It's not worth it. But it's like it's not for you to say.
Man.
You know. So I think there's an aspect to that where some people probably looked at those customs and were probably like, like just buy another one. But then I've heard guys too, like the exact opposite way. Like I remember being at Links one time, and there's this other guy in there with this like piece of shit solid state Marshall trying to like, and he's like totally punishing the repair guy about trying to fix it. And it's just like, dude, these are not made to be like fixed. Like these are made to like get your use out of it and then replace it. And not saying it can't be fixed. It probably can be, but it was just one of those funny things where it's just like, dude, this is like probably like a $200 amp at this point. Just get another one.
Yeah, it's like crazy because the repair cost, you know, I remember having a CD player, Pioneer CD player, go bad. And at that time, there was this place on Main Street in Manchester and down Carroll County. And my mom took me there and I took the CD player there. And the guy was just like basically talking me out of doing this process because it was like the cost of him to repair it would exceed the value of replacing what the functionality was there of a CD player.
Yeah.
And it's like I understood that, and I went out and I bought a CD player that also could record on CDs. And it blossomed a whole fascination with recording. You know, it was like sort of like this problem where it was frustrating that person couldn't solve my issue. But it's like weird how that kind of like, dominoed into some other things that turned into really cool things for me in life. But like, I'll think about that project too. And I'm like, I wish I had that back in my hands because I bet you there's just some fucking bad solder joint somewhere where it was like the thing would work. The digits would show up. It's playing the CD. No sound on the output. Man, it was probably just a solder joint or something, you know?
Probably something really... I think about that all the time. There's like so many things like that I have up there. There's one I have up there right now where like I fucked up with my power source and I ran 18 volts to it instead of 9. And I did that with... It's an electro harmonics pedal. I did it with another one. I took it to the same dude that modded this, and he eventually fixed it because there's a thing in those that will fry so that way the whole pedal doesn't fry,
like a crowbar thing I've heard of, like certain types of protection circuits from over voltage.
Yeah, so it's like I know I can just replace that in it. I just haven't bothered doing it, and it's gonna be a pain in the ass. But there's so many things like that I think back to that I probably like tossed or threw away because it's like, oh, it just doesn't turn on anymore, and it's like it probably just had a cold joint on the switch.
Man, like
the switch is the first thing that goes bad.
I haven't like fixed everything I've ever tried to, but man, when you do get the fix, when you get it, man, it is a high like nothing else, man.
It works.
Solving a problem and it just like it was useful to you.
Yeah, when I fixed that thing for the first time, it was like I could have danced.
I
was like, holy shit, I did it.
Yeah.
And it was like, now I'm gonna build one.
I was at Wallride. I had gotten my hands on this Stanton DJ mixer, and it just didn't power on, or maybe it did at first, but then it didn't. And it was like I opened it up, and it was just like a bad capacitor in it, and like got on Parts Express or Mouser or just some site and ordered some the same valued capacitors, and I was like did my best to make them be like the same, got them, and replaced this one that looked like it was bad. It was like puffed up or something. And then it just worked, and I just remember just being like, man, like just this like confidence about like taking on anything. But it was like how many times after that where I would try to fix stuff, and it just became like a complete disassembly, and I'm salvaging all the parts because I couldn't fix it, and I just made it worse or whatever.
We had at our first apartment, she had this old tube console thing that like kind of worked. And like I got sound out of it, and I got to where I could plug a phone into it, but it had like some fucked up connections. But I didn't know enough about this stuff at this point. So we're going to move, and it's like we got to take this thing down the stairs, and like it's gonna be a nightmare. So I was like, I gotta take it apart. But then I was like, oh, I'm gonna gut the amp out of this. So like I gutted that all out. And I was reading about it, and it was like it had parts in it where I could build like with other parts I would need to get, but it was like I could use the transformers and tubes in this to build 2 deluxes and one like kind of sort of Marshall-y thing, and I was like, I'm gonna do that, fuck yeah. And I kept them for years. Like the next apartment we had, the whole time we lived there, I had them, and I just like never learned enough to be able to like understand how to make those parts work in the next thing.
Yeah.
To where finally it was like, I just have to buy fresh stuff and start from scratch. Like I have to buy like the parts for the thing I want to build, because I don't understand how to get like these transformers. I didn't even understand how to get them out of the chassis. I was just like, I'm lost, and I'm afraid to like cut stuff, and I don't know what wires are what, and I can't find anything that tells me what they are. So finally, it was like, it's just going to the trash. I don't know what else to do. I just pulled all the tubes. I was like, I know I can use these, and then the rest of it was just like, this is fucking junk. I can't, like, I would love to be able to figure this out and make this work, and I know there's a way to do it, but it's just beyond me, and away it went.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that over the years my limitation of space, you know, has kind of been like in my aid of keeping me from collecting more junk than I could actually make use of. Having this stuff around, it's like this fucking weight of just being like all these to-dos and possibility that becomes like, at one point maybe in the beginning it was like optimism and like enthusiasm, and now it's like resentment and bitterness. You're just going like, you're just like, I don't have enough time for that, and you're just like, it's like, you know, just like, I still want to do that, and you're like holding on to it, but then you get rid of it, and it's like, it alleviates, like, just like, eventually you'll just forget you even had that crap, and you're just like, yeah.
It's time, and it's also like, do I have to acquire a bunch more stuff to be able to do it? Like, for example, that needs like, either needs a full refret or a partial refret. And for a little bit, I was like, I'll get the tools, and I'll just learn how to do that, which I could do, but like, that's like a couple $100 in tools I'm gonna have to get, and like a lot of time, and like that might be the only time I ever do it, and it might not come out right.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'll just eventually take it to someone and pay them like $300 to do it.
Yeah, the high risk, possible low reward or no reward is like, yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna be a full-time guitar tech, so like,
yeah.
I don't know that I need like fret dressing tools.
Man, I've been eyeing up a desoldering iron for years now, but you're just like, man, these things are like no less than like 300 usually, you know?
What is it?
Desoldering iron. So it's basically like Heiko is a pretty big brand. It's like blue, yellows, or schemes. But it's like, it looks like almost like a hot glue gun, but it's like a vacuum, and it's like this, like, it's like a hollow, it's like a tip, but it's like hollow, and so the tip gets real hot to melt your solder. And then it's also like, I think it's like the trigger has maybe a button. I could be messing this up. I almost feel like it's got like 2 buttons where you like, when you've melted the solder, you then engage the vac part, and it's like, it just sounds like a little compressor running or whatever, and it just sucks up the solder. And it's like, you see a lot of YouTubers using that, but I've seen other brands, but the Heiko is pretty like runs the market, it seems like. But yeah, like, you get into that level and you're going like, man, like, I'd have to do a lot of repairing to get my money's worth out of that. And it's just like been on the list for years, but like, man, when you desolder stuff, and it's like, it does happen a lot, it just becomes like, wow, you know, I don't have enough space on this bench right now for that anyway. But like desoldering with like solder wick or you know, that stuff can be a hell of a pain in the ass. You end up fucking things up, pulling traces off a PCB, burning up parts. But like with them solder guns, the desoldering guns, it just like, you just see people in line like, and they like wiggle the part out, and you're just going like, man.
Yeah, I bought like the solder sucker,
like a tube that like spring,
and I could not figure it out how to do it.
Yeah, there's
I broke it like immediately.
There's like I've watched videos trying to figure out like, I'm going to get one of those, and it's like there's just a lot of options out there, and then you watch reviews online or videos talking about which ones are the good ones, and it's like not clear, as like they all seem particular.
This was one from StewMac that was like $20, and maybe more because StewMac's expensive. And yeah, I just couldn't get it to work, and then eventually it broke, and I was just like, well, that sucks.
Yeah,
like that was a total waste. So I bought the wick, and I'm trying to think of when I've had to use it, because I think most of the time I just do a total half-ass job of just like, I just heat the solder up and pull the thing out, and I'm just like, that's good. But it's usually in bigger stuff too, where it's like, it's not like a tight PCB where like I really have to have it super clean. Like in that thing, like it didn't need to be perfect.
Yeah, I've had a lot of trial and error with the solder wick. Never had the sucker thing, but I have it in my wish list. I'm still kind of like on the fence about getting one of those, but it's like I kind of want to get the desoldering gun, but that's like $300. I just don't want to come off of anytime soon. But yeah, I think my next, as I'm finishing up getting my studio set up, the next space is going to be the electronic space. I've had a lot of I've had 3 inquiries since I've not been building about building things, and it's like every time I get one, it's sort of like kind of gut wrenching in a way, because you're just like, I just don't know when I'm going to get back to that. Like I thought it was going to be sooner than now, but like I just don't know when. It's like in my mind I'm like, until I can even get to setting that space up, and it's like, I don't know, it's like it's so cold, and just like it's dark at 5, and you just like don't feel like doing shit after it gets dark. Like I need to saw wood to make shelves. Yeah. But it's like, I don't have outlets outside of my house, and it's dark and cold, and you're just going like, if I can't get it done in the daytime, then it's got to wait till tomorrow, but then tomorrow's a fucking rain out. So it's like, I don't know, it's just like the winter time. It's like, I've worked on trying to get the studio up and going, and hopefully in the next like couple weeks I should get everything like wired up, like cable wise. And I always look at the sort of the aspects of winter that make you more like hibernative or whatever, where you don't go out as much and you're inside a lot. It's like I always sort of like champion that, as like that's the time I feel the least guilty sitting in a studio just like doing stuff that doesn't have any real necessity. Like I'm just recording, and like who knows what might happen, but like I just like the wintertime for capturing. Because it's like once it starts getting nice out, it's like all these fucking chores start happening, and you're like out a whole lot more, and it's just harder to get wrapped up into a recording project. Man, I feel like I could just talk and talk and talk with you, man. I'm like, I'm always just trying, like with like, okay, last time it was like 2 hours. I gotta get this thing down to like an hour. I know it is probably blown past 2 hours, but
pretty much. I think we're about 10 o'clock now.
Shit, man. I appreciate you participating in this.
Anytime. I'm do it again.
Now we've kind of laid this down, like, I guess maybe, ideas that come to you, feel free to, share any brainstorms you get. But I feel like, it's been nice to be able to just go off on all these different tangents with like, the recording and pedals and stuff. But like I said, I could just keep on going. But yeah.
Yeah, next time maybe we'll have a little more structure, but I feel like we've kind of segued pretty well with this one.
All right, well, I want
to cut
that out.
I want to hook this character.